Hi, people. Are you here? Oh, are you here? Let's get this show popping. Send for your bomb, I see you. Let's get this show popping, my people. Thank you for being here. All right. I see you. Let's get it started. Let's get it started. My people, bienvenue, bienvenue. Welcome back to you and I. Merci, merci. Merci, merci, merci la famille. Merci d'être là. Alors, aujourd'hui, comme vous voyez, je suis on camera. Ah yeah, ah yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Et c'est open mic, c'est open mic. Alors, on est en français, en anglais, en KinyaRwanda, en Swahili. My people, welcome back to You and I Talk Show. As you can see today, I am on camera. And so let me know, leave in the comments if you can see me. We're going to talk in English, we're going to talk in French, we're going to talk in KinyaRwanda, and most likely even in Swahili. So we're starting in English, and so it's different topics, different languages. And the first topic that we're going to talk about is Trump and South Africa, my people. You heard about that? You heard about that? Oh man, you know I'm gonna comment on that one. Uh-huh. So, and then in French, we're gonna talk in French. We're gonna talk about Congo and Kabila. Hein? En français, on va parler de Kabila qui est sorti pour ne rien dire. Ne rien dire. Donc, on va parler de ça. And we also want to talk about the French justice, which has spoken on the wife, the former first lady of Rwanda, the wife of Habyarimana, who was assassinated for the genocide to happen. And then we also have a topic about these activists, Kenyan and Kenyan activist and Ugandan activist. You know, thank you very much. Yeah, let's find the story. So we can start about that. The East African community scam. So it's a lady from Uganda, which I admire so much. Her name is Agater, and then you can probably see her full name. I'm gonna show it to you in a minute. And so her and Boniface Mwangi from Kenya, who's also an activist. So they went to Tanzania to support freedom, to support our fellow Africans, you know, and then the disgrace, you know, to womanhood. Allegedly, the president of Tanzania, who has turned into Chama Chama dictators, as Kenyans heavily calling her out, you know. this woman was abused while in Tanzanian custody. Her name is Agate Atuhaire. Atuhaire. She's a well-known activist, respected. I respect her so much. I respect her work. Like the latest work that I had seen from her was when there's this like an older lady who was abused in Uganda. This older lady, I think like the government was trying to abuse this older lady, right? And then this young lady, she did a really great job of speaking out and making sure that older woman was well taken care of, when the government of Uganda was trying to abuse her. So that's like from where I know from her as an activist, and she like organized this massive fundraising to help the older woman who was getting abused by Museveni. you know so the idea that this East African community is just about these chama dictators, these dictators just getting together and doing business, Museveni in Uganda, the Kagamistan in Rwanda. Let's not forget that Tanzania was involved in changing governments in Uganda. Tanzania helped Museveni overthrow the government in Uganda and take over Uganda by the power of the guns. uh, and now Tanzania is against peaceful activists helping their fellow Africans in peace. But Tanzania supported Museveni to overthrow government by the power of the gun in Uganda. And he has been oppressing Uganda since then. And now Tanzania pretending to be a democracy. And this woman in Tanzania, the president of Tanzania, has never been elected. As you know, she came into power because Magufuli um, is suspiciously was unalived, very suspiciously, because he was one of the very few. What's going on, my people? Mic check, mic check. Oh yeah. Yeah, we just got sabotaged. I don't know what happened. And I couldn't see anymore. So hopefully if you're in the comments, let me know. So yeah, so that's what's happening with the East African community scam. Tanzania, have they ever been activated in speaking against the Kagamistan, which is in Congo, invading and plundering? That's East African community, but they take a peaceful activist, this lady from Uganda and Boniface Mwangi from Kenya, and they abuse them. And allegedly this one was so abused that allegedly she was even sexually abused. And knowing that Tanzania is under the leadership of a woman, and then to allow this to happen, as this person is posting, saying, thank you for posting and for denouncing this, that Sulhu Samia is a disgrace to female leadership. We don't expect this in this time and era. and that's because she allowed it to happen, and she's trying to impose herself in power, even though she was never elected, even though she came in because the previous person was unalived suspiciously, because he opposed the pandemic scam, the trust the science scam. So this is the lady, Ugandan lady who was arrested and abused, and she was with Boniface Mwangi from Kenya, and it appears as if even the Americans posted about it. So imagine what kind of community are we part of? East African community, just about doing business, but our fellow Africans cannot help our fellow Africans in peace. Huh? The East African community, the Kagamistan in Rwanda, killing, plundering in Congo. What is the East African community doing about it? Nothing. Uganda as well, killing, plundering in Congo. Museveni oppressing people in Uganda. What is the East African community doing? Nothing. And Museveni was supported to come into power by Tanzania. So how is Tanzania going to be against peaceful activists like this? It's just madness, you know. And then the Kenyan president trying to turn into a dictator as well, allowing for abductions in Kenya. Museveni abducted Besigye in Kenya, you know. And now they're doing this to a lady president, never elected, doing this to a fellow woman. Just madness, madness, my people. So, we encourage this lady to continue, and we encourage all Africans who are standing against tyranny to keep standing, keep standing. Thank you so much. So another thing that I saw this week, as you know, this is my social media review, is Obama getting exposed. Go check out the video. Obama getting exposed that he has used false, the false security and all those things, that he was a government asset, that he's a fraud, that he may face military trial, that he was trying to destroy America from the inside. Like the crazy times that we're living in, everything will be exposed, all eyes will be revealed, including Obama. As you know, it has now been revealed that he was even behind the Islamist terrorists in Africa, those who destroyed Libya, along with Qatar, and Trump. This will lead us into Trump. Trump just went to Qatar and met them. These people are monarchies, zero democracy over there, and they support Islamist terrorists in Africa. He never called out any of that. But then he goes in front of the whole world and starts lying fiction about this what this man was posting about. um, Jeff Timmer talking about fun fact: there's no white genocide happening in South Africa. Trump, Musk, Vance, Rubio, and the rest are lying, and they're racist. And did I mention they're lying? Meanwhile, most of America's media, crickets, 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 crickets. Now, what are they cricketing about? Because, my people, check this out. Larry Madowo doing a great job. The images that Trump actually holds up, the images.
According to Reuters, this image is actually from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and it was filmed by Reuters video journalist. Reuters fact-check team said it actually showed humanitarian workers lifting body bags in Goma following a deadly assault by the rebel group M23. It's a screen grab.
So you see the audacity, of inventing, making up a fiction white genocide in South Africa, and then using the images of actually a real genocide that is being ignored, which is the genocide against the Congo people, genocide being committed by the Kagamistan in Rwanda, which is supported by the USA, which was actually brought into power by the USA, by the Clintons, the Kagamistan in Rwanda supported by the USA, by Qatar, by the UK. They don't say, they don't denounce it. And then they invent a fiction, white genocide in South Africa. And to show, to speak about the fiction, white genocide, they use the images of the genocide that they ignore because it's black people, or what is it, because it's Congo, because the people who are committing genocide in Congo, the Kagamistan in Rwanda, is actually supported by the USA. Like, the outrageous lie was caught and exposed. So the other thing that I wanted to say about this is that, keep in mind that South Africa is a democracy. South Africa is a democracy, so they're allowed to have dialogue. And the opposition, the man who was speaking that Trump was denouncing, is the opposition in South Africa. They're allowed to have freedom of speech, and they can say whatever they want to say, because they have freedom of speech, and it's a democracy. And the song that he's complaining about, a song, um, this man, Julius Malema, has actually never killed anybody, but Trump actually just went to the Middle East and he met with people who are still on the terrorist list, who have killed people who are terrorists, and all these Arab leaders who are monarchies, zero democracy, but he never denounced that. And South Africa is a democracy, and they're allowed to compete in the opposition. So imagine you're a president and you're being questioned about what the opposition said when you're going to another country. And then, and then I have to say that the South African president was also very, very, very weak in defending himself and defending his case. Most likely that he was not prepared. The other thing he could have reminded Trump is that we are here in America and Canada, and this is a land. This is a land where Europeans, white people, Trump, have actually committed genocide on the native people of this land, exterminated the native people of this land, and took over the land, which is something that the Europeans also tried to do in South Africa, but Africans in South Africa resisted and are still alive, unlike here in Canada, in the USA, where the native people have been genocided and conquered. So I don't know if Trump and Musk were hoping or that Africans also become colonized and exterminated, because this is what would have happened in South Africa with the whole apartheid, and with the whole people coming in from Europe and taking over South Africa by the power of the guns. We're talking about white people coming in from Europe and taking over South Africa, and then they had to be fought, they had to be resisted. And Trump likes to talk about illegal immigrants. What if we saw that as illegal immigration? Because people coming from Europe, do they have passport? Do they have visas? And then coming into South Africa and then imposing themselves by the gun. I mean, isn't that like armed illegal immigration? And so, if you have inherited land, if you inherited land that is stolen by the power of the gun, by the people who are practicing illegal immigration, then if you inherited that land, of course you want to keep the land. But what about, and then when people when the original owners of the land try to take back the land, you're like, taking back the land without compensation. You're like, oh, taking back the land without compensation. But here is an idea that you can reflect on. When speaking about compensation, what about all the money that people who have been occupying this land and exploiting this land, in this case the Europeans or the white people who have been exploiting and occupying this land and making money on this land, how much compensation have they offered to the original inhabitants of that land, the Africans, the black people, how much compensation have they offered for generations since they have been exploiting that land and making so much money off the land? How much revenue sharing did they actually do? So if people have made so much money, and how much money have they actually made on the land since they have been occupying the land? So if people were to calculate how much money that land, how much wealth that land has produced for them, and then say, oh, well, how much compensation did you offer versus how much revenues that you made on this land? How much revenue sharing did you offer versus how much revenues that you made on this land? And now you speak about compensation, but you have been so compensated because you have made so much money and you have become so rich by this land. So for people to take away the land without compensation, but you get to keep all the wealth that you have made on that land, I think it's a pretty great deal. I think it's a pretty great deal, my people. If it's not a pretty great deal, then let us know how much money that you have made on that land as you were exploiting it and occupying it. And let's see how much compensation that you have offered to the local people that you found on that land. And then we can start talking about compensation. So I may end on that talking about, like, when people talk about compensation, when they have made so much money on that land already without sharing any of the revenues. It reminds me of, like the Haitians when they freed themselves from slavery, from enslavement after 400 years, a couple of 100 years of enslavement, and they fought for their freedom. It wasn't given to them. Then the French were like, oh, you need to pay us. You need to pay us compensation for the loss of income that we are going to lose because you are free. So then they are in debt for more generations because they fought and freed themselves from slavery. So don't talk about all the money that they made from slavery. No, they don't look at that. They're entitled to it. They're like, no, we own you, and if we lose you, then you need to compensate us for the loss of you working for us for free. So then Haiti had to pay, but nobody spoke about how much money you made on the Haitians. Became billionaires, and people inherit billionaires. You know, they don't talk about that. So these are all topics of reflection. And then, of course, we know the influence of Elon Musk. Elon Musk, who grew up in South Africa. And Elon Musk, who there's been a documentary about him, actually, a documentary on Democracy Now, which talks about his history and how he comes from. You know, let me show you the Democracy Now, Elon Musk, and how him and his group, you know, his group coming out of ties to apartheid and
This is Democracy Now!
neo-Nazi movements. So I encourage you guys to go and watch it so you may understand it. Once again, people came to Africa and they became so rich. Like Elon Musk family became very rich, exploiting Africa. Nobody ever talks about that. And then he came to America and got a lot of support from the American government. He's not a billionaire by accident. He comes from people who got rich by exploiting and getting rich in Africa. And then he comes to America, makes so much money. So I don't know if he has beef with South Africa, even though they became billionaires and made so much money for being in South Africa. Let's listen a tiny little bit.
In the 1950s are when the first laws South Africa had discriminatory laws before, but you see the specific apartheid laws, which are much more aggressive, and in many ways reminiscent of the Nazi Nuremberg laws against Jews in the 1930s. They have very similar echoes in stripping black people from the right to work in certain places, their movements, controlling them, confining them to areas. You already had a situation which is now, come to the fore because of recent events with Trump, but
you mean with Elon Musk giving the Nazi salute?
Yes, but also with the sanctions over land, is that the 1913 Land Act had already deprived most black people of land in South Africa anyway. At that point, the 7% or 10% as it was of the population that was white owned more than 85% of the land under the Land Act of 1913.
So, my people, you can continue the document and listen to this. So, imagine people come and they create laws to dispossess, to steal, to take away land from the original inhabitants, the black people. And then when black people try to take back the land, they're like, oh, why genocide? Why genocide? And then they try to manipulate their way into the South African market so that Elon Musk can sell his satellite. And then you wonder, if people are even committing crimes against you, then why are you even trying to do business in that country? Like, why are you insisting and manipulating your way into the country if the country is committing genocide? So they have already manipulated their way into Congo, selling the Starlink satellites in Congo. And then you wonder, what are the national security risks when people are capable of lying, making up a fiction white genocide when they have been ignoring an actual genocide in Congo? What are the security risks when then they have satellite access, my people? These are all questions that people have to think about, because it's not just about doing business. It's also the philosophy of the people you're doing business with. And if you're doing business with people who don't want you to even exist, what do you think is going to happen? What if they use their businesses to continue to colonize you, oppress you, and to do what they accuse you of doing, which is false? Because if anybody has committed genocide on Africans, it's actually Europeans who have committed genocide on Africans. But now inventing a white genocide fiction, wow, so offensive.
So the apartheid laws kick in the 1950s. Elon Musk was born in 1971 in Johannesburg, and at that point the Prime Minister was a guy called John Vorster. And John Vorster's background is very telling, really, because Vorster in the 1930s had been a member of a neo-Nazi militia called the OB, which was openly sympathetic and linked to the Nazis in Germany. It was responsible for all kinds of attacks, but including burning Jews out of their businesses in Johannesburg.
And we're talking about what years?
In the 1930s, so the late 1930s. And then South Africa goes to war as an ally of Britain against Hitler. The OB and the groups that support them, like Vorster, people like Vorster, they actively oppose that. They actually are in touch with, OB is in touch with German military intelligence, and they plan to assassinate the Prime Minister of South Africa, Jan Smuts, and overthrow the government and have it support Hitler. That plan fails because the Germans are unable to provide the necessary weapons and back out. But in 1942, John Vorster, later Prime Minister, stands up and gives a speech, and he talks about the system that their kind of ideological belief system, which was Christian nationalism. And he says, Christian nationalism in South Africa is the same as Nazism in Germany and fascism in Italy. It's all anti-democratic. It's all the same thing. By 1971, when Elon Musk is born, that man is the Prime Minister of South Africa. And Christian nationalism is the basis of not only the political philosophy, but the entire education system that Elon Musk is brought up into.
So take us from Elon Musk's grandfather moving to South Africa in the 50s to his father, how they gained their wealth.
So Elon Musk's grandfather moves there in 1950s. He's not particularly prosperous. He arrives without a lot of money, but it's Elon Musk's father, Errol, who makes the real money, principally through investments in emerald mines in Zambia. And, you know, mining conditions in southern Africa in that period were really pretty dire in the 1960s and 70s. Very high death rate, very poor conditions, but the owners got very rich. And
you hear that, my people? The owners got very rich by exploiting Africans, very, very poor conditions, you know. And today their children are billionaires because of that back support, that foundation. But they're still not happy. No matter how much money they make, no matter how many billions and millions they make, they're not happy. They still want to dominate. They're still willing to make up a fiction genocide in order to have business deals, to control, to have satellites over Africa. Like, listen to this. Just when are they ever going to be happy? Like, how much money is happy? You know, and then they said America first. Trump says America first. Why can't they be happy with America and leave Africa alone? No, they have to try to sabotage Africa. They have to invent a white genocide. And then they have to bring their businesses in through manipulation. Because the issue now is ownership. You know, South Africa being, after the local people, the black people being so oppressed for so long, they want ownership of everything that comes into South Africa, which is not a bad idea for local people to have ownership. But Musk doesn't want to give any ownership, despite the fact that he's a billionaire and he can enrich some local South African people by sharing ownership by allowing ownership, local ownership, 30%, they say. He doesn't want to do that. Despite the fact that his family became so rich by exploiting Africans, and he's already a billionaire, and he could afford to let Africans, you know, be owners of whatever business is in South Africa and other places in Africa. But no, 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 no. He would rather invent, lie, manipulate in order to get the business deal. You know, they're getting business deals. They're not even showing how their business is the best service, best this, best that, everything. Meritocracy, right? No, they're manipulating their way in. Oh, we are white people. There's a white genocide. Oh, you don't want us because we're white. But they have been owning the land, becoming billionaires, owning 80% of the wealth while being 10%. They didn't see none of that. They're not grateful for none of that. They want more. They want everything. And when black people resist, they invent. They have to invent a white genocide in order to distract from the real genocide against Africans, against Congolese people who are dying, who have been dying. 15 million of Congolese people have died in a genocide, silent, because the Kagamistan in Rwanda, which is killing and plundering in Congo, is actually supported by the USA. And because the minerals that they're plundering in Congo, these people actually use these minerals. They use these minerals in their cars, in their phones, in their satellites, in whatever they're sending out there. They need Congo. They need Africa. But instead of giving Africans a fair deal, a clear deal, no, they want to manipulate. They want to invent some fiction drama, portray themselves as the victims while they are the exploiters, and then get the business deals. It's crazy. Oh, my people, let's listen a little bit more, because this guy really exposed it, and you have to know these things to understand. So I'm cautioning and warning Trump that he's going to lose his momentum. if he doesn't understand the history, the politics, because Africa is not asleep anymore, and Africans are not sleeping, and they're not going to accept for people to invent a genocide when they are the exploited and the genocided, who have actually welcomed people who have become so rich on the African continent, but they're still not grateful. They don't see how much they have acquired, how much wealth, despite being 10% owning over 50% of the country. They don't see none of that. They still want everything and willing to lie and manipulate to get those business deals. Africans are not sleeping and they're not going to take it. So Trump wants Africans on his side. He better come back to the truth. He can't be lying. He can't be caught lying. And the people who are next to him, who gave him that fake story, and then he actually shows an image of the Congo. That is the universe speaking. You cannot play, you cannot lie, because the universe is watching you, man. The universe will embarrass you internationally like that when you lie, and then you get caught so blatantly on the genocide that you ignore. So Trump will lose his momentum because he's heavily, clearly influenced by Elon Musk. Elon Musk, who clearly has beef with South Africa due to his background. Let's watch.
And Musk lived what can only be described as a neo-colonial life. If you were white South African in that period and you had any money at all, you lived with servants at your beck and call, you lived in sprawling housing, and what you see with Elon Musk is that when we get a glimpse into just how much money he had when he and Elon's mother get divorced, she says at the time that, well, he owns a yacht, he owns a jet, he owns several houses, so there was considerable wealth there.
Was the grandfather of Elon Musk on the record in his support for Forster?
Well, he was certainly on the record in his support for apartheid, very vividly so, yes. And he said that that's why he'd moved to South Africa from Canada in 1940 was in support of it. Now the
You hear that? Move from Canada to South Africa because South Africa was practicing apartheid, so that he can live the racist life, exploiting the native people and getting rich, becoming a billionaire, not being grateful. And then when black people become free, they want to run away from South Africa. They want to come to Africa, become rich, oppressing Africans. And then when Africans become free, they want to run away from Africa and talking about white genocide. No, what?
grandfather himself is killed a few years later in a plane crash, but is not known what Elon Musk's grandmother's personal views of Forster particularly were, but they were both avid supporters of the apartheid system, and the grandmother lived for a number of years afterwards.
So you've been talking about Elon Musk's maternal grandparents and how they moved to South Africa, but talk about their roots in Canada.
Originally, the grandparents have no connection to South Africa. They're born and grew up in Canada, and in the 1930s, the grandfather...
You hear that, my people? Born and grown in Canada, right here where I am. And Canada is a country where Europeans came and committed genocide on the native people, completely conquered them. The situation in which the native people in this country are in is unwishable upon anyone. You would not wish that to the worst of your enemy. So this is Canada, where Europeans have committed a real genocide against the original people of this land. It's not enough for them. They're like, let's go do this in Africa. Let's go to Africa where we are still oppressing the natives. Maybe Canada has become free, too free for them. Maybe Canada has become a democracy for them. We need to go and live in a place where we can still colonize, exploit, kill, oppress the natives. This is them.
Joshua Haldeman, he's head of the Canadian branch of a US movement called Technocracy Incorporated. And Technocracy Incorporated is essentially a movement to overthrow democratic government in the United States and have technocrats, but big businessmen in many ways, come in and run the country. That's partly a reaction to FDR's election and New Deal and massive reforms that he's introduced.
Americans, did you hear that? Have technocrats come in, billionaires come in and run your country. Sounds a little bit like something that we are currently living, actually. Allow these technocrats to come into your government and see everything. Give them the entire data of your government under the excuse that they're looking at the losses that you've had for your government. Have the authority to go into all the records of all the people, the entire data, and take that. But they are private billionaires. What are they going to do with all that data that they have gotten from the entire country, from the entire government? These technocrats will come in and take everything. What are they going to do with all that data that they have taken in? And now you hear that they have this technocracy idea. They're pretty much politics. It's business in politics. Like what is going on? Just listen. You think these things are only going to happen to Africans, but then you realize that these things are actually happening to America and Canada and other places. Then you realize that maybe Africans are resisting this technocracy, and that is why the technocrats have to invent a fiction genocide in South Africa when we have a real genocide in Congo that they have ignored for years because they support the Kagamistan in Rwanda, who is plundering and killing in Congo, committing these genocides, because whatever he plunders, he brings to them, because their industries, the billionaires, cannot exist without Africa's riches and resources.
Introduced in the United States.
So from Canada, they would help to launch a coup against FDR?
No, Canada had its own branch of this movement to overthrow the government in Canada. Haldeman heads that branch. And through the 1930s, it takes on increasingly fascist overtones. They start wearing grey uniforms, modelled on the Nazi brown and black shirts. And so when Canada declares war on Germany in 1939 alongside Britain, the movement is banned because it's clearly sympathetic to Hitler. Then Haldeman is arrested.
Elon Musk's grandfather.
Elon Musk's grandfather is arrested. They find documents sympathetic to the Nazis and other subversive documents inside his house, and he is sent to prison for a few months and then remains on essentially a subversion watch list for the rest of the war. Yeah, so he's basically regarded as a Nazi sympathizer, a fellow traveler.
And about a decade later, he moves to South Africa. Why?
So after the war, he founds another political movement which has deep anti-Semitic roots and actually promotes the forgery, the protocols of the
Elders of Zion.
Elders of Zion, that's it. But obviously after the war and the Holocaust, there's no real appetite for that in Canada. It's a failing political movement. And so his eye casts down to South Africa. By 1950, the apartheid government has been in power for 2 years. And Haldeman looks at it and thinks that's just my kind of place, which clearly that was what he would want to create in Canada and had been trying to create in the 1930s. And so that's the point at which he and his wife, May, they move to South Africa and become very fervent supporters of apartheid.
Now, I wanted to blend in some breaking news in addition to cutting off all aid to South Africa, news of the region, and that is Sam Nujoma, the freedom fighter turned president who led Namibia to independence from apartheid South Africa in 1990, has died at the age of 95, often referred to as Namibia's founding father, known for his motto, a united people striving to achieve a common good for all members of the society will always emerge victorious. Used to be called Southwest Africa, became the independent Namibia. Talk about Sam Nujoma and how that fits into this picture of South Africa through apartheid.
So Samedi Joma was the head of the Southwest Africa People's Organization, which was the liberation movement of Namibia. SWAPO, indeed. Really, SWAPO takes off and is able to have effect after Angola becomes independent with the fall of the Portuguese dictatorship. The Portuguese colonizers leave Angola, and Angola provides a base then for SWAPO to really fight to liberate Southwest Africa. That becomes known as the Border War. Euphemistically, the South Africans call it the Border War. They actually invade Angola in an attempt to overthrow the Marxist-leaning government of Angola, but also to keep SWAPO at bay. But the war goes on, and eventually South Africa loses that war.
By the way, let's take a moment to remember the genocide that was committed in Namibia by Germany, by the Germans, the Europeans, the white people who came to Namibia and committed a genocide in Namibia, exterminated local people, and until today, some of their hairs still on land in Namibia. So I'm just letting you know that as you make up a fiction genocide, we are going to start talking about the real genocides that are actually happening against Africans, not made up ones.
At that period, though, one of the things you see is that Peter Thiel, another member of the PayPal mafia, a very close friend of Musk, he had been at school in Johannesburg, but his father gets a job on a uranium mine near Swakopmund in what is then Southwest Africa. And so Peter Thiel moves there as a child and goes to school there. And the thing to know about Southwest Africa, the reason it was separate from South Africa, is that it had been a German colony until the end of the First World War. Then it becomes falls under South Africa's mandate, partly because at that point South Africa was a British colony. When South Africa becomes a republic in the 60s, it hangs on to Southwest Africa and it becomes a South African colony. But the population, big part of the population was of German ancestry. And you could, I remember going to Windhoek.
Trump is also of German ancestry, right? We are tying the dots together.
In the early 90s, and the main thoroughfare through Windhoek was called Hermann Goringstrasse, named not after the Luftwaffe chief, but after his father, who had been a governor of German Southwest Africa. In Swakopmund, it was even more extreme. It was notorious for many, many years, really into the 80s and 90s, as a hotbed of open support, continued support for the Nazis and for Hitler. The New York Times has a story from the mid-70s of a reporter pulling up at a gas station to get his car filled with gas, and the attendant openly giving a Nazi salute and saying Heil Hitler to him. You could go to curio shops in Swakopmund and they would sell Nazi-themed mugs and flags and things, and they openly celebrated Hitler's birthday every May. Thiel went to a German school there, so that's the atmosphere he grows up in. His father is an official on a uranium mine there. And the interesting thing about the uranium mine, amongst many other things, is that it supplied part of the uranium to develop the South African atomic bombs in the 1970s, which were developed in league with Israel. Now, part of
You hear that, my people? And let's not forget that the uranium that they used for the atomic bomb that the USA dropped on Japan was taken from Congo. You hear that? You hear how they claim to own mines in Africa and then use the natural resources of those mines to become rich, to become billionaires, and then turn around and use their billions against the very same people, the very same continent of Africa that actually made them rich. They're not rich because they're any special. They're special. They're exploiters, colonizers, predators who are ungrateful for every good thing that has happened to them. but it's all going to be exposed.
So the deal with Israel was that South Africa would deliver yellow cake uranium to Israel. We don't know where the yellow cake came from. It may have come from that Swakopmund area mine, or it may have come from somewhere else in South Africa. But South Africa was shipping yellow cake to Israel at the same time because it too was developing nuclear weapons.
And talk about what Peter Thiel has said about all this. You know, I remember as we cover conventions for decades now, Peter Thiel standing up at the first Republican convention that nominated President Trump and, you know, supporting him and who he is.
So Peter Thiel has said of his time in Swakopmund, and particularly the school, which he describes as particularly a brutal education, that it turned him against government and into a libertarian. And I think that's an interesting element in all of this, is that one of the things that isn't necessarily appreciated outside of South Africa is that there's two kinds of whites there. There's the Afrikaners who we've been talking about, but there's a big English-speaking white population. And one of the aspects of the English-speaking population was they, on paper, said they opposed apartheid, but they gained all of its benefits.
So there are two tribes of white people. How come when they're talking about white people and Europeans, they never talk about tribes, eh? But when it's Africans, they're like, oh, tribes, tribal war. There's two tribes. They even speak two different languages. One is Dutch, the other one is British. One speaks English, the other one speaks Dutch or German. Even though they call themselves Afrikaner, but they are European Africans. This is why I was even telling people who talk about Elon Musk, is he African American? I'm like, no, he's European in Africa. So when he is a European in Africa and he leaves Africa, well, he's still a European. You know, he hasn't become an African because he went to Africa. The same way that African Americans, despite how many generations they've been in America, they're calling them African Americans. Why? Because of their origins. So he's also European in Africa. When he leaves Africa, he's still a European. Now he becomes a European American, not African American.
And most of them, certainly not all, there were some really heroic individuals, but most of them did very little to actually end apartheid. But one of the products of that is you have people like Musk and Thiel who have done very well and whose parents did very well out of the apartheid system, who deny responsibility for it. They blame it on the Afrikaners, they blame it on a government, extreme right-wing government. But then they have to explain how it is that their own parents were so able to do so well out of apartheid, and then they put that down to individual talent, that they're naturally gifted, and that leads them down this whole libertarian path, anti-government path, because essentially they have to explain how they too were benefits of apartheid without taking responsibility.
And talk about their relationship, Peter Thiel and Elon Musk.
Well, they're co-founders of.
Yeah, they want us to believe that they are naturally gifted. They don't want us to see the benefits, the privileges that they have gotten from being colonizers and exploiters. They want you to believe that they are smart and special because they have been able to exploit others, to colonize, to enslave, and then to get very rich from that business, or the business of colonization on oppression.
PayPal together. They both essentially share the same kind of worldview from what I can make out. They're libertarians. They're very opposed to any kind of DEI. You've seen their deep hostility to DEI. I think Thiel buys into the same message about anti-white, the war on white people in South Africa that South African white groups like AfriForum have been pushing in the United States. So I think that philosophically they're very similar, and obviously they have a very close relation.
The audacity to talk about a war on whites, as if South Africa has left Africa and went to Europe to invade Europe to unleash a war on whites. Huh? Imagine you're in your home and some people invade you, and then you resist, you fight back, and then they say that you're fighting a war against them. But did South Africa leave Africa and go and try to take land from the British, from the Dutch in Europe. No, they left Europe, came all the way to South Africa. And then when Africans resist, they're like, oh, there's a war on us. But you came all the way here for it. They want to get rich and become so rich, become billionaires, oppressing others. And then when you free yourself, they're like, oh, this place is hostile. They're against us. We have to leave and go in America where we still own it. And let's invent that they're trying to kill us. What? Come on, guys. This is the era where you cannot lie anymore. And you cannot pretend to be a victim when you are actually the oppressor.
Relationship.
And then talk about David Sacks and talk more specifically about what you're referring to as the PayPal mafia. I don't think most people in this country understand all of these connections and this unusual situation where these some of the wealthiest men in the world work together, founded PayPal, and now surround the president of the United States.
Yeah, so David Sacks was born in Cape Town in the 70s. And he moves, his parents take him to Tennessee when he's 5 years old.
So you see all these billionaires or millionaires, very, very rich white people who got rich from Africa, right? But what have they done? What have they done for Africa since they got so rich, right? If they really cared about Africa and Africans, wouldn't we know about good things that they have done? You know, and wouldn't Africans be wanting them in, because saying, oh, these are very good people, they have done so and so and so and so and so and so for us? But no, we don't know any good things that they have done for Africa. Just exploitation and getting rich by exploitation. And now still manipulating the narrative so they can continue to be richer, still against the idea that Africans may have some ownership of the land, of the businesses that are happening on their land. Wow. Look at all of them.
So he didn't grow up in the same milieu as Musk and Thiel, but he did grow up in the white South African diaspora, for sure. He clearly shares the same views. You know, as you say, they're part of the PayPal mafia. They all get rich from the creation of this company. They're all at the top running it. And now Sachs has emerged as Trump's AI and crypto czar. Again, part of the same project. So you can see this.
And he was a chief fundraiser for President Trump, as you said, born in Cape Town.
Yes, a big. So they've all emerged with essentially, from what I can make out, the same philosophy. And of course, that's only been reinforced by.
So what's going to happen when AI and all this technology and all these satellites who are coming into Africa have been created by people who have, you know, ideologies of oppression and exploitation? What's going to happen? The AI, the machine, is a reflection of its creator. So they may even create AI and machines and all these things that are anti-African, that do harm to African people. Because what? Because their creators, the creator of the artificial intelligence and the machines, this is their ideology. You cannot give what you don't have. You know? Imagine this.
Their success. They're convinced, obviously, of their own genius and worth, and that government, whether it's South African government or in this case it seems to be the US government, is an obstacle to success.
And then we talked about.
And then how is government an obstacle? But then government has given so much money to Musk, for example, to be able to have his business. Look into how much money he has gotten from the government. You know, so the government is a problem when it's trying to do something for everybody, but the government is not a problem when it's giving him millions for his business. And then when they're into government talking about, surveillancing government waste, but who is actually watching over them? If they're the ones supervising the entire government, talking about let's check out all the waste, but who is actually supervising them to know what they're doing with all that data? What if they steal all that data and go and use it in their AI project stuff and their machine project stuff? The data from the entire US government for however many years that it has existed before they took it from the inside. Oh my goodness, America.
Said it in part one, finally Roloff Botha making this little quartet, white men of a certain age together, and his history also a part of the PayPal mafia.
Yes, he's part of it, and he has not emerged as a open supporter of Trump. I'm not entirely sure what his personal views are on this, but he does have a very interesting background. His grandfather was Pik Botha, who was the last foreign minister of apartheid South Africa. And Pik Botha's job essentially was to go around the world, particularly the West, and assure them that apartheid was being amended, was being dismantled, when in fact it was in many ways, although what was known as petty apartheid, which was the routine discriminations, the segregation, was being dismantled. In fact, the political system was actually only reinforcing it, solidifying it. The government of the time cooked up a system of 3 parliaments that would represent different parts of the population, but and give some people who weren't white a vote, but none of those people were black. There was no black parliament, partly because they were being pushed into the independent homelands. The idea was that they were no longer South African anyway. So Pik Botha went around trying to apologize and excuse for this system, and he was successful with conservatives. He saw a lot of Reagan and people. They loved him here, and the same with Thatcher in Britain. They saw them as the acceptable face of apartheid. And he was so deluded by the end, he was convinced. I remember meeting him during the era of the transition to democracy from apartheid. He was so convinced that he was indispensable to the system that Mandela would have to appoint him foreign minister, which he duly did not.
Would you say the background of all these men's families was fleeing Mandela's South Africa?
Well, some of them left before. I mean, it's worth noting that Elon Musk left in 1988 at the age of 18, just as he would have become eligible to be drafted into the South African army, as all white males were at that point, which might have led him to fight the border war that I was talking about in Angola against SWAPO, or it might have led him into the townships, which at that point were in complete ferment. And, you had a huge amount of civil unrest in South Africa at that point. The country had largely become ungovernable. It was under a state of emergency, and the white troops were trying to keep some form of order in the black townships like Soweto. He left before he had to do any of that.
So very interestingly, for people who aren't aware, Elon Musk had a company called X.com. It was an online bank. It merged with Confinity in 2000 to form PayPal. The merged company was renamed PayPal in 2001. And you have all of these guys who you've just laid out. Well, I think Botha is a partner at Sequoia Capital, but now key players. And that brings us to Trump's order on Friday to cut off all aid to South Africa and offer refugee status in the United States to the white South Africans who are, quote, victims of unjust racial discrimination. But interestingly, many in the right-wing white lobby say they want to stay and focus on ending black majority rule. This is Flip Bass, the chairperson of what's called the Solidarity Union.
We might disagree with the ANC, but we love the country. As in any community, there are...
We love the country. We love the country, right? Yeah, not the people of the country. We love the country because the country has made you so rich. What is there not to love? We love the country. Of course you love the country. You are rich. You got land. You're exploiting people. You are 10%, but you own over half of the land by exploitation. Of course you love the country and you don't want to leave. And then they want to fight for black people to own anything. They're like, we need to stay and fight black people so that they don't own nothing. And then others are like, no, we're out of here. Whoa, 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 whoa. So it's like Europeans are allowed to come to Africa, kill, exploit, take over, colonize, oppress, become so rich. And if black people, God forbid, black people fight back, oh, no, 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 that's unacceptable. So it's like they're wishing that South Africa and Africa was exactly like Canada and the USA, where the native people, the local people that were found on the land by the Europeans, have been completely conquered, exterminated. Wow.
Individuals who wish to immigrate. But the repatriation of Afrikaners as refugees is not a solution for us. We want to build a future in South Africa.
So he is speaking in front of a sign that says AfriForum. Put this in context. And what about Afrikaners saying, no, this is our land. We don't want to come to the United States?
Well, AfriForum is backpedaling furiously now because there's been a huge backlash in South Africa from people who blame it for this situation. In fact, some people have accused it of treason. But if you look at what AfriForum was saying just a decade ago, and certainly in 2018, when people like Kali Kriel, who was head of the AfriForum, and others were coming to the United States, they were claiming there was a white genocide. They were claiming there was a war on white people in South Africa. And they were essentially trying to characterize the post-apartheid era of one of oppression of Afrikaners, that they were the true victims of it. And they're not alone in this. There had been a phenomenon ever since the end of apartheid of Afrikaners painting themselves as victims. There was a song emerged in the 1990s called De La Rey. It was very popular with Afrikaners. It was sung in bars and rugby matches. And De La Rey was a famous general who fought to the bitter end against the British in the Boer War, the Second Boer War, in the early 20th century, which the Afrikaners then lost. And this song essentially is an attempt to take Afrikaners back to a time when they were the victims, when it was their women and children dying in the British concentration camp, when they were the people who were oppressed. And it conjures up this Boer general who, he may be losing the war, but he's going to fight to the last, a bitter ender. And this is how they've been characterizing themselves, some of them. And AfriForum is part of that kind of attempt to rewrite history and make out that they're this minority that has long been persecuted, not just by the post-apartheid era, but by the British, and they have a long history. And apartheid was just a means of survival. All they were trying to do was to keep themselves and their culture alive. It has had one other effect, which they hadn't expected and has alarmed them, is that in all the orders that have been given out cancelling aid and agreements, one of them affects agricultural products being imported to the United States, which have generally been duty-free as a means of helping Africa. One result is that their own products are no longer being imported duty-free into the United States. So these white South African farmers who've been complaining of oppression will now actually be being hit with tariffs or regular duties. And so it's going to cost them financially, which is one of the reasons they're so upset by it and pretending that it was nothing to do with them.
Guardian reporter Chris McGreal. He was the Johannesburg correspondent for The Guardian during the last years of apartheid.
Thank you so much, Amy Goodman, for this. My people. So you can see for yourself the entire history, the entire background. I think Trump is gonna lose his momentum if he embarks on this journey of inventing a fiction victim when we have real victims and real serious problems, and he had the momentum and he could fix so many stuff. But if he's gonna get distracted because of Elon Musk and his beef with South Africa, well, then they'll get what they deserve, right? So I personally think it's not a bad idea for people, if they feel oppressed or in danger in any way, to leave South Africa and go to the USA, where the Europeans have already conquered the land. Yeah, man, like sometimes when we live out here in the West, and you complain about how some things, or racism or this and that, what do they tell you? They're like, leave. If you don't like it here, leave. Go back to Africa, or go somewhere else. So same stuff, my people. If they feel like it's not working out for them, and it's really bad where they are, then yeah, bon voyage. Go to America, go somewhere else. You could also go back to Europe. So yeah, so let's move into French, and we're gonna comment just a tiny little bit about the Kabila thing, and then we are gonna go into KinyaRwanda, my people. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, and keep leaving me comments. I see you in the chat. Rene Sharonje, karibu, karibu sana. All right, so let's move into French just a tiny little bit, and keep talking about. Merci, merci la famille. Alors, en français, on va parler de ce traître, falsificateur, KABILA, usurpateur de l'identité congolaise, qui est venu parler pour ne rien dire à la famille. Oh là là, on en parle, on en parle. Alors la famille, merci, merci d'être là, merci d'être avec nous. Donc un petit commentaire sur KABILA qui est sorti pour parler. Il a beaucoup, beaucoup parlé, mais il n'a rien dit. La chose la plus flagrante dans son speech, c'est qu'il n'a absolument rien dit sur le Kagamistan au Rwanda. Le Kagamistan au Rwanda qui tue au Congo depuis des années. Le monsieur était président pendant plus de 15 ans, pendant 18 ans au pouvoir. Il n'a jamais rien fait contre le Kagamistan au Rwanda. Pourquoi? Parce que c'est le Kagamistan au Rwanda qui l'a mis au pouvoir. Parce que c'est le Kagamistan au Rwanda qu'il sert. Donc, il n'a jamais rien fait. Mais voilà, il fait un discours et il ne dit absolument rien. Comment pouvez-vous être quelqu'un d'un pays qui aime son pays, qui aime son peuple, et votre pays est sous occupation étrangère? Votre pays a été envahi par le Kagamistan, qui tue par millions, qui pille par milliards, et vous faites un discours dans ce temps-ci et vous ne dites absolument rien. Donc pour moi, là, Kabila est sorti pour confirmer sa trahison de la nation Congo. Il a parlé pour ne rien dire, et surtout, il n'a rien dit contre le Kagamistan au Rwanda, qui tue par millions depuis qu'il était au pouvoir pendant 18 ans et qui pille par milliards. Kabila est sorti, il n'a rien dit. Rien, rien, rien. C'est une confirmation de sa trahison. C'est une confirmation qu'il travaille pour le Kagamistan, parce que le discours, là, il fait plaisir au Kagamistan. Eh oui, il va tout de même pas oser dire quoi que ce soit face au Kagamistan, alors que le Kagamistan, c'est lui son sponsor, hein. C'est lui son parrain, hein. C'est lui qui l'a installé au pouvoir après avoir assassiné son faux père. On l'appelle Kabila, Kanambe Kanambi kuri Congo, Kabange, ati ngo ngwiki, ati ngo akabange, akabanga ka Kagamistan muri Congo. Non, vraiment. Yo, il est sorti pour ne rien dire, il a rien dénoncé. Donc son discours là, il fait très, 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 très plaisir au Kagamistan, parce que c'est le Kagamistan qui l'a installé au pouvoir, et il pensait en faisant un deal, en partant. Il ose même parler de comment il est parti au pouvoir. Comme s'il a fait une faveur à la nation Congo d'être parti au pouvoir. D'abord, il est venu au pouvoir illégalement. Il est allé dans l'armée. C'était un rebelle. Il n'a jamais suivi un cursus normal pour être dans l'armée, pour mériter des grades quelconques dans l'armée. Quelle armée? L'armée du Kagamistan? L'armée du Congo? L'armée tanzanienne? Quelle armée même? Hein? Et donc, il laisse le pouvoir par deal parce qu'il espérait que Tshisekedi allait tellement être tellement nul et qu'ensuite il allait s'organiser pour revenir. Mais malheureusement pour lui, là, Fachi a quand même fait quelques bonnes choses, quoi. On ne peut pas le féliciter sur tout, mais on peut être d'accord qu'il a fait certaines bonnes choses. Et parmi ces certaines bonnes choses qu'il a fait là, c'est complètement changer le narratif, diplomatiquement se battre et amener la cause congolaise devant le monde entier et faire basculer le Kagamistan médiatiquement, militairement, même dans l'argent, même les actions que le Congo a posées dernièrement pour boycott Rwanda Air, pour faire en sorte qu'il ne circule plus. Ça, là, c'est pour justement résister contre le Kagamistan qui tue et qui envahit le Congo. Maintenant, là, le KABILA espérait que Fachi allait devenir un leader trop faible. En tout cas, pas autant qu'il est, pas comme il est devenu, quoi. Donc là, ils sont déçus. Donc là, il est sorti de sa cave. C'était toujours ça le plan. Il fallait qu'il revienne. Il avait toujours planifié de revenir. Il n'est jamais parti. Il est toujours au service du Kagamistan. Là, il est sorti de sa cachette. Pourquoi? Parce que le Kagamistan est désespéré. Désespéré, la famille. Plus désespéré que jamais. Plus désespéré que jamais. Donc moi, je dis, il n'a même pas honte. 18 ans au pouvoir, des millions de morts sous son pouvoir. Et il ne parle pas, il ne mentionne pas le Kagamistan qui est sponsor responsable de tant de crimes au Congo. Il a confirmé sa complicité. Donc voilà, voilà. C'est ce que j'avais à dire en français là, sur ça. Donc faites très attention le Congo. Trump qui invente un génocide en Afrique du Sud pour pouvoir manipuler les gens, pour qu'on lui laisse le terrain pour qu'il fasse business. Les business qu'on vient de voir un petit documentaire sur Musk et sa famille qui ont cette idéologie qu'ils doivent dominer. Et donc vraiment le comble du cynisme, un génocide au Congo qu'ils ont ignoré, mais ils utilisent les images de ce génocide pour parler d'un génocide fiction en Afrique du Sud dont ils ont inventé, qu'ils inventent rien que pour faire du business. Ces gens-là ne se préoccupent pas de vie humaine. Ils ne sont là que pour faire l'argent. Malgré qu'ils sont des milliardaires, des billionnaires, tout ça là, malgré qu'ils ont tout, mais la seule chose qui leur importe, c'est l'argent. Donc, les Congolais, soyez très vigilants, même dans les deals que vous allez faire, parce qu'ils ne se préoccupent pas du tout de la vie des Congolais, quoi. Donc, nous, on sait que Kabila est rwandais de père et de mère et qu'il est devenu président au Congo. Comment est-ce qu'un Rwandais de père et de mère est devenu président au Congo? Ensuite, on se dit, bon, est-ce que c'est vraiment étonnant qu'il a été utilisé pour piller le Congo, pour aider le Kagamistan au Rwanda à continuer à piller et à tuer au Congo dans le silence total? Sans Kagame, sans le Kagamistan au Rwanda, Kabila ne serait jamais devenu président au Congo. Ce n'est pas à cause du peuple congolais qu'il est devenu président. Il n'a jamais été élu. Il a été imposé. Il a été élu par le Kagamistan et les autres prédateurs. Justement pourquoi? Parce qu'il savait qu'il ne défendrait jamais le Congo, qu'il ne défendra jamais les intérêts du Congo. Donc, l'ingratitude, s'il vous plaît, quand Macron parlait d'ingratitude, on peut aussi parler d'ingratitude dans le cas de Kabila, lui qui est devenu président au Congo malgré qu'il n'était pas congolais, malgré comment il est devenu président, après l'assassinat de Kabila, le vrai, après avoir été manipulé, après avoir été imposé par le Kagamistan, il est quand même devenu président pendant plus de 15 ans, 18 ans au pouvoir. Les Congolais l'ont laissé partir en paix, ils lui ont donné des honneurs, sénateur à vie, ils lui ont donné partir avec ses richesses et l'ingratitude, au lieu d'être reconnaissant pour ça et d'accepter tout ça et de vivre sa retraite tranquille, non. Il faut qu'il reste dans l'ombre et qu'il continue de comploter contre le Congo pour qu'il organise encore son retour, pour qu'il revienne. S'il revenait au pouvoir, si par malheur il revenait au pouvoir, le Congo va reculer d'un autre 30 ans. Hein, parce qu'au fait, le Congo est en train de se battre contre le Kagamistan, qui lui est au pouvoir depuis 30 ans, contre Museveni, contre les grands prédateurs qui, eux, sont au pouvoir depuis très longtemps. Il ne faut pas s'attendre à ce qu'un président vienne au pouvoir et que dans 5 ans, dans 10 ans, qu'il ait pu résoudre tous les problèmes que ces prédateurs de longue date ont fait, ont causé. Non, il faut être patient avec soi-même. Mais vraiment, moi, je remercie Imana que Kabila est enfin sorti de son trou. Je l'avais prédit là, il y a quelques mois, plusieurs mois, j'étais sur HK Today. Je leur ai parlé de Kabila, je leur ai parlé de comment il souhaitait assassiner le président congolais. Je leur ai parlé de cinéma de négociation, tout ça là, on en a parlé. Là, les gens vont commencer à m'appeler prophète, hein, parce que vraiment, j'ai tout prédit, quoi. Et c'est arrivé même plus rapide que je le pensais. Donc là, il s'est exposé, il ne peut plus faire du mal parce qu'il s'est exposé. Et quelqu'un qui a été président de ce pays, parler et ne pas dire un seul mot sur le Kagamistan qui tue et qui pille au Congo, ça là, c'est la confirmation de sa trahison. Donc voilà, nous on est avec la vérité, nous on est toujours du côté de la vérité, peu importe qui a la vérité, nous on est du côté de la vérité. Et puis voilà, c'est tout. Ouais, c'est tout ce qu'on avait à dire. Alors, sur cette histoire d'Afrique du Sud et la terre, tout ça, là, moi, je dis que les gens qui parlent de, ouais, vous allez nous prendre la terre sans nous compensation, moi, je dis, mais pourquoi ils ne parlent pas de combien d'argent qu'ils se sont fait sur cette terre? Depuis qu'ils occupent cette terre, combien d'argent qu'ils ont fait? Est-ce qu'eux, ils ont donné une compensation quelconque aux originaux de cette terre? Non, zéro. Et si on devait compter tout l'argent qu'ils ont fait sur cette terre, et leur demander s'ils ont partagé leurs revenus. Non, jamais partagé. Mais après, quand les gens veulent reprendre leur terre, ils sont là. Ah, vous nous reprenez la terre sans compensation. Mais attends, mais vous avez offert quelle compensation depuis des années que vous avez fait des milliards sur cette terre? Alors, calculons combien de milliards vous avez fait sur cette terre. Est-ce que vous allez nous donner 50% des milliards que vous avez fait sur cette terre? Non, 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 non. Vous allez tout garder. Donc, vous allez garder tous les milliards que vous avez fait sur cette terre et ensuite, vous voulez être payé aussi quand les originaux récupèrent cette terre. C'est comme si quelqu'un venait habiter dans votre maison, il vous prend votre maison et il passe du temps à s'en profiter. Les gens payent le loyer, il poche, il met ça dans la poche. Et après, un jour, le vrai propriétaire de la maison revient, ils disent, bon, dehors. Après, il est là, non, mais payez-moi, donnez-moi compensation pour les loyers que je vais perdre. Et quoi? Quoi? Mais attends, et tous les loyers que tu as récupérés, est-ce que tu nous as donné compensation? Ah ben alors, on va calculer combien tu as fait. Tu nous donnes 50% de ce que tu as fait. Ah non, tu ne donnes pas? Ben, comment alors peux-tu avoir la compensation pour ne pas garder quelque chose qui ne t'appartenait pas en premier lieu? Et alors que tu n'as jamais partagé les revenus que tu as fait sur cette chose. Mais tu veux compensation quand tu perds? Oh là là, ça me rappelle que quand Haïti s'était libéré, et puis ils ont demandé à ce que ils payent pour leur libération, quoi. Alors ça, c'est un petit là de l'Afrique du Sud qui est en train de se lever contre donc le narratif et il est en train donc de complètement dire que c'est archi faux, quoi. C'est archi faux. Donc voilà. Alors, on va donc passer en KinyaRwanda. Et en KinyaRwanda, alors, on va parler vraiment, ça, c'est la fille de l'Ouganda là, qui a été abusée en Tanzanie avec l'activiste Kenya. Et tout le monde maintenant est contre le président tanzanien qui n'a jamais été élu, qui est au pouvoir, justement, parce que Magufuli a été mystérieusement unalived. Mmh. Donc, en KinyaRwanda, on va parler de la dame de l'ex, première dame du Rwanda, donc la dame de Habyarimana, qui, cette semaine a été, innocentée. La justice française s'occupe de son dossier, et donc l'a, finalement, trouvé, innocent. Donc on va en parler et j'en profite, pour aller lire donc vos commentaires sur, Facebook, parce que j'avais posté sur Facebook et puis donc on va en parler. Ça, c'était pour avertir la femme du Kagamistan. La femme du Kagamistan, pour lui dire, lui qui collabore avec le Kagamistan, avec son mari, pour opprimer les Rwandais, je lui ai dit: «Yo, même si ça prend 30 ans, toi aussi tu seras poursuivi par la justice, quoi». Donc je vais aller lire les commentaires, sur ça en KinyaRwanda et donc ça va être donc notre main story, pour, donc en KinyaRwanda et donc voilà l'histoire. Je vais donc vous lire, ce que, Jean-Luc Habyarimana, qui est le fils de Habyarimana, qui était là quand l'avion qui a été descendu par le Kagamistan, là aujourd'hui on le sait, on en a la prouvé et les autres, et qui est mystiquement tombé chez eux à la maison. Jean-Luc Habyarimana était là, et donc il sait pertinemment ce qui est arrivé chez eux et il suit le dossier. Donc il en parle. Il dit: «Nouveau camouflet pour la propagande du FPR. La cour d'appel de Paris vient de juger sans objet la requête du parquet antiterroriste qui demandait une mise en examen de Madame Habyarimana. Vendredi dernier, les juges d'instruction ayant mené une longue instruction enquête de 17 ans confirmaient déjà que le dossier est vide et fondé sur des témoignages contradictoires, voire mensongers. Aujourd'hui, avec ce jugement de la Cour d'appel qui rejette la demande du parquet et se dessaisit donc du dossier, la seule issue logique du dossier est désormais un non-lieu clair, comme l'a rappelé maître Philippe Meilhac, l'avocat de Madame Habyarimana. Le dossier demeure certes parasité par d'importants enjeux politiques. Mais nous faisons néanmoins confiance à la justice française pour dire le droit et rien que le droit, sans céder aux pressions afin que cette veuve de 82 ans soit enfin reconnue pour ce qu'elle est, une victime persécutée depuis des décennies par le FPR qui, après avoir assassiné son mari, cherche désespérément à imposer un narratif cynique et mensonger afin de cimenter l'apartheid mémoriel qui règne au Rwanda. À tous ceux que l'injustice accable, le temps finira toujours par dévoiler la vérité. Donc, moi j'ai dit par rapport à ça, c'est comme, par exemple, comme les Congolais nous l'avaient chanté, que hein, la vérité prend les escaliers pendant que le mensonge a pris l'ascenseur. Et donc, la vérité a pris 30 ans pour se faire entendre, alors que partout dans le monde, on avait déjà entendu le mensonge. Waouh! La famille. Alors, c'est de ça qu'on va parler en KinyaRwanda. Merci d'avoir été avec nous. On passe en KinyaRwanda. My people, tugere mu Kinyarwanda, tuganire ku nkuru iri à la une. My people. inkuru rero iri ara une ni ukuntu first lady wa Habyarimana ubutabera bwo mu Bufaransa bwavuze ngo baramubeshye baramuhimbiye itekinika. Rero twari turimo dusoma poste mu gifaransa ya Jean-Luc Habyarimana wabipostinze, hanyuma rero tubihereho tubiganireho tubiteremo igiparu, hanyuma ndaje mbabwire igiparu nari nabiteyeho kuri Facebook mbwira Nyiramongi nti Nyiramongi rero iyo ubona umugore wa Habyarimana yarakurikiranywe imyaka 30 ni himbara wamwise Kanjogera, navuze nimumbwire Kanjogera Nyiramongi muti niyo byatwara imyaka 30 humura nawe uzakurikiranwa. Karibu rero mu kiganiro, uyu munsi turi live muri Samedi DETENTE ku itariki ya 24 z'ukwa gatanu 2025. Karibu sana my people. Nuko rero my people, kera kabaye tugiye twumva Abafaransa ngo ngwiki, ariko shaha Abafaransa bakunda kudukinisha bya hatari. Abafaransa ngo kumbe umudamu wa Habyarimana bari baravuze ngo niwe wishe Habyarimana, hanyuma yamara kumwica agahita ahunga u Rwanda, hanyuma yashakaga jenoside. Ni gatanazi nahoze ndi guserereza kuri Facebook muserereza kubera ko yari yapostinze ibintu bisekeje avuga ukuntu nyine Kagamisitani yatubeshye. Umuntu yapanze jenoside, arangije kugira ngo jenoside ibe agomba kwica umugabo we kugira ngo abone uko akora jenoside. Noneho umugabo we yishwe ari we umwishe, arangije niyo jenoside yateguye gukora arayihunga, ahita ayihunga. Yari mu ba mbere bahunze. Amuteye nta muntu watanze kwa Habyarimana guhunga. Arabahunga ajya mu Bufaransa aho gusupervisinga jenoside no gufata ubutegetsi, kuko bavuga ngo yicishije umugabo we ngo kugira ngo afate ubutegetsi. Yicishije umugabo we kandi ngo yari ari kumwe n'abantu bo muri famiye ye mu ndege. Can you believe this? Ngo kugira ngo afate ubutegetsi. Arangije aho gusupervisa jenoside, aho gufata ubutegetsi, harahunga we. Ibyo ni ibiki? None uyu munsi barimo baratubwira ngo kumbe baramubeshyeraga. Ariko shaho Inkotanyi, shaho muri babi. Ibaze kwicira umuntu bakamwicira umugabo, barangiza bakamara imyaka 30 bamutesha umutwe, babizi neza ko ari bo bamwishe, babizi neza ko ari Kagamisitani watanze oda, babizi neza ko bakomanze misile bakazicisha Uganda bagakoresha UN kugeza aho misile bazigeza, bamurashe, babizi neza n'intambara babashoyeho bakimara kumurasa, bakabirengaho bagahimbira umugore ngo niwe wishe umugabo we, bakamara n'imyaka 30 bamukurikirana bamutesha umutwe. Ibaza ubwo bugome satanike. Bene wacu b'Inkotanyi shahu n'aba satanike shahu. Ibaza ibyo bisitani. Rero kugira ngo umenye nuko umuntu ibyo bamurega bamuhimbiye, ni ukuntu abantu baba expert mu kumenya abakrimineri. Bamara imyaka 30 bakora ankete, hanyuma muri 2025 bakaza ngo ngo nta kintu twabonye, ngo n'ibindi byinshi baramubeshyeraga. Yo you best believe ko yaza kuba ari kabuhariwe iyo aza kuba yarakoze ibishitani bamuregaga yari kuba yarafashwe bari kuba barabibonye direct akaba ari naho rero byamviriyemo gusendinga warning kuri Nyiramongi wigize akari akajya he kandi ari umukrimineri afatanya na Kagamisitani ahubwo rero njyewe mbona ibi ngibi bashinja umugore wa Habyarimana njyewe mbona Nyiramongi ari capable yo kubikora Anko Kaga wa Kagamisa acunga sana ibintu byo guhimba ngo umugore yishe umugabo we ngo kugira ngo afate ubutegetsi ibi bintu ni gahunda ya Nyiramongi iyi gahunda ni gahunda ya Nyiramongi ushobora uri capable uhora upangira umugabo we ushobora kwicisha umugabo we kugira ngo agume ku ngoma y'u Rwanda ategekana n'abana be ategekana n'abahungu be yohereje mu gisirikare bamurinze iyi gahunda noneho bagakora self projection bakavuga ngo ni umugore wa Habyarimana wabikoze ibyo Nyiramongi arimo apangira Kagame nibyo bashinja umugore wa Habyarimana Anko Kaga wa Kagamisitani cunga sana kubera ko Nyiramongi ari capable yo kugukora ibishitani wabeshyeye umugore wa Habyarimana cunga sana rero ikindi kandi navugaga ni mumbwirire Kanjogera Nyiramongi ni himbara wamwise Kanjogera ko niyo byatwara imyaka 30 humura nawe uzakurikiranwa reka rero mprofite nye gusoma comments kuko ntago nari nazisomye sinari nakagarutse kuri Facebook we murabizi ukuntu Facebook yambrotse nataye habitude yo kugaruka kuri Facebook kabisa mukomere cyane my people nataye habitude yo kugaruka kuri Facebook dore ngo hashize iminsi 2 ntaza iminsi 2 yose yarashize reka rero twisomere comment twisekere turi muri Samedi DETENTE nyine nta kundi Beatrice Umuhoza atazavudukanwa nare namusubije azawungira aho yajya hose kuko inkotanyi nizo zabizanye ibyo bintu urumva se byo gukurikirana abantu mu mahanga aho bajya hose urumva se aho yajya hose ibyo bintu ingwingwe ntiyari izi kugira gute ngo yarabyigishijwe ibyo ni inkotanyi zabyigishije abanyarwanda Habyarimana ntago yari yarigeze akurikirana impunzi hanze y'u Rwanda ariko Kagamisitani yakurikiranye abantu hanze y'u Rwanda ni ukuvuga ngo Kagamisitani y'ubwayo kandi ari abakrimineri ari abajenosideri Rwanda na Congo ari abajura ari ababeshyi ni ukuvuga ngo nabo bazakurikiranwa niyo byatwara imyaka 30 niyo bahungira kuri Mars iriya planete ba Elon Musk tumaze gushyira hanze mu cyongereza bashaka kwigarurira ni handi no kuri Mars bazagera Beatrice Umuhoza I see you yo dore umufobaganyi hano ngo Muyango Dani Daboro arimo arankurikira urumva aranyaka friend request urumva reba niwe wanyatse friend request yarangiza agasiga comment ambwira ngo hari igihe mba numva ngufitiye impuhwe twate disciple mba numva kabisa mbafitiye impuhwe ibaza impuhwe z'abafobaganyi we umuntu amfitiye impuhwe niyo mpamvu usa nkurikira niyo mpamvu anshakaho ubushuti ntafitiye impuhwe Kagamisitani ariwe mwicanyi ariwe mu genosideri Rwanda no muri Congo ariwe mujura ariwe mubeshyi ariko twebwe abanyakora dufitiye impuhwe ariko afobaganyi Imana ishobora byose Muyango Dani shaka handi ujya gufobaganira sha undi nawe ngo isashake ngo akurikiranwa nande niga n'ubutabera umva ngo akurikiranwa nande none se umudamu wa Habyarimana yakurikiranwe nande ati ngo ngwiki ariko vrema rero hari abantu bibwira ko byane nababwiye ni Imana ntibera bibwira ko kubera ko bo bashyizeho ubutabera bw'abantu bubera bibwira ko Imana itabera izabareka Urujeni Janti I see you komera cyane Clementine Uwineza komera cyane Dusabe Claude ati akaga kose u Rwanda rumazemo imyaka yose n'uriya muzimu wa Kanjogera winjiye muri uriya mugore ntibazamurenganye bazamukatire nk'imyaka 2,000. Nizere ko muracyambona se baradusabose nanone we. So mumbwire niba muri kumbona, mumbwire niba muri kumbona my people, muracyari kumbona se? Yeah, let me know. Nari mbonye mu kanya byari byicanze ukuntu. Okay, reka iyi ntuza nyishyire hano. Okay, so nuko dukomeze rero my people, mwebwe mwabivuzeho iki? Nari ngiye kuvuga ngo reka mbashyirire link yo kuza muri studio nk'ibi ngibi Claudine Mukashema ari kuvuga, hanyuma muze mubyivugire kabisa, muze mubivuge, kandi niba mudashaka kujya kuri kamera nta kibazo muze mubyivugire. Hanyuma rero in the meantime reka mbe ngiye muri comment ndebe uko byifashe. Rene Shyorongi mwari mumbonye se wana, bari badusabose wana, ibi ni ibiki baba bari kudusabota? Ndagarutse mubwire abafobaganyi muti mujye mukomeza mugerageze systeme dukoresha, niyo mwadusabota ni handi turagaruka online, kubera ko dufite systeme dukoresha kandi twishyura, turi muri studio twishyura. Ni ukuvuga ngo aba bantu show igenze nabi, donc bafite ubwoba ko twajyana amafaranga yacu ahandi, urumva se? Kugira ngo rero tugume muri studio yabo aribo twishyura, aho kugira ngo dukorane n'indi company, bagomba gukora ku buryo show igenda neza buri gihe, urumva se? Bivuga ngo rero abafobaganyi muhora musabota show yanjye mujye mukomeza mubigerageze, kuko muba muri kunyereka impamvu nishyura, kandi n'abo bantu bishyurwa kugira ngo bamakinge sure ko show ari stable, noneho nyine ubwo mukaba mutuma nyine bavuga bati dore niyi mpamvu twishyura. Ubundi se wa mugani najya nibaza n'impamvu mbishyura, kandi rero mujye mukomeza mugerageze rwose kuko nicyo twishyurira amafaranga kugira ngo nyine show ibeho malgré yuko mudusabota. Rene Sharongi ati babwire uti umunyarwanda yaragize ati ibihe biha ibindi niko Nyiramongi kuko abona bizagenda gute. Rene Sharongi ati ntacyo bakora kitari mu bupango. Urabona yari ari kuvuga kuri biriya bya South Africa urumva se kuko napostinze mbere yo kugera kuri iyi nkuru yo kwa Habyarimana n'ukuntu umudamu wa Habyarimana ubutabera bw'Ubufaransa bwasanze ngo baramubeshyeye baramuhimbiye. Kare nahoze nyine ndi gupostinga ku byerekeye uyu mutipe ngo ni Musk wo muri South Africa n'ukuntu batangiye kubeshya ngo muri South Africa ngo hariyo genocide kugira ngo babone uko bikorera za business. Urumva se ubundi rero muri East Africa batangiye kwamagana cyane uriya mu perezida wo muri Tanzania yahohoteye aba activist bo muri Uganda no muri Kenya. Ya nkuru yo muri South Africa mu kanya rero maze gushyiraho documentary mu cyongereza yerekana nyine ukuntu ba Musk nyine bavuye muri apartheid ukuntu bakiriye muri apartheid n'ukuntu nyine batitaye ku banyafurika nyine bo making amafaranga nyine nuko rero ikindi kintu indi nkuru nari nabonye ni ukuntu ngo Obama bagiye kumujyana mu rukiko. Obama ngo yarabeshye ngo mu minsi itaha rero bazamujyana mu rukiko berekane ukuntu yakoreraga leta yo muri Amerika urumva se. Hanyuma ikindi nari nabonye ni uyu mujene Samuel Beka-Byansi wagiranye interview na Denise Zaneza, congratulations mukomere cyane. Hanyuma aranapostinga ari gushyira Kagamisitani hanze nyine nk'ibisanzwe mukomere cyane. Indi nkuru rero ni inkuru y'ukuntu KABILA yasohotse yaje ku mugaragaro. KABILA yaje ku mugaragaro akora amaspici habe no kuvuga na gato na rimwe kuri Kagamisitani iri gutera Kongo iri gusahura muri Kongo yamaze abantu. Ibyo rero ngewe nabwiye abakongore ni confirmation y'ubugome n'ubugambanyi, confirmation kuko yavuze ariko agaceceka agahishira Kagamisitani ntayishyire hanze. Bigerageze kandi dukore mpaka nyine bigenze uko bigenze neza cause none se ariko vraiment so bari baduteye nanone so hopefully ubwo nyine we are back. So ni ibyo ngibyo rero twavuganaga nta nubwo ndi bumare igihe kirekire cyane mu kinyarwanda kuko maze igihe kirekire nyine ndi kuvuga mu cyongereza nashyizeho na documentary nyine y'ibyo kwa ba Musk wabeshye wahimbye ngo muri South Africa hari genocide kugira ngo babone gusa uko bibonera za business. Ikindi rero Prince Rugaba Patrick yari yapostinze ati ibijya gushya birashyuha. Kagamisitani arimo yiyerekana babeshya ngo imbunda made in Rwanda byahise imbunda zavuye muri Israel nka kwa kundi Volkswagen ziva mu Budage barangiza bakitelefona bakabeshya bagakora itekinika ngo twebwe dukora imbunda twebwe dukora Volkswagen barabeshya. Ariko rero ntakibagirwe ko na Hitler yabikoze urumva se nuko dore rero Trump disappointment bya hatari arimo arahimba ngo jenoside muri ntuza kugira ngo abone uko yijyanirayo business dore uwo bavuga umuri inyuma ariwe Musk mu kanya rero maze gushyiraho documentary ivuga ku mateka ye muzajye kuyireba iyi documentary ni ivuga ku mateka ye ivuga nyine ukuntu nyine yavukiye muri South Africa
places
n'ukuntu nyine babayeho nyine bamuhereye kuri ba sekuru na ba sekuruza n'ukuntu basapotingaga apartheid n'ukuntu bakize kubera apartheid nuko barangiza bakaba uyu munsi bari guhimba ngo barimo nibo ba victim urumva se kandi ahubwo muri South Africa barahakiriye Afurika yarabakijije ariko Afurika yarabakijije aho kugira ngo bishimire ko hagira n'undi munyafurika nawe wakira babona abanyafurika bababwiye bati natwe turashaka kugira ownership bati reka bagashaka ahubwo kwigira victim no guhimbahimba kugira ngo bagire business abanyafurika bo ntibagire nothing urumva se kubera ko mfite ikibazo cya satellite cye nuko abanyafurika baba bashaka kugiramo 30% we rero ntashaka gutanga na 1% harashaka kugira satellite ayi owninga dominatinga abanyafurika ba owninga 0 bamubwira bati tugomba natwe kugira ownership ati ye baba we ati muratwanga nka bya bindi manipulation zo muri Kagamistan urwango kugira naho bahimbye ngo nuko rero yerekana ko ari bo na groupe y'abahimbye za PayPal na za X n'iki byose ko bose ari abantu bakuriye muri South Africa mbega ari abana iwabo bakiriye muri apartheid nyine babikiriyemo nuko nyine iyi documentary rero muzajye kuyireba kugira ngo mubashe gusobanukirwa n'aba bantu abari bo n'ibyo badukora nyine nuko twabyitwaramo urumva se my people naho ubundi tuzumirwa nuko rero reka njye kureba ibyo ntuza gatanazi yari yapostinze ku mugore wa Habyarimana kuko byari bisekeje cyane naranamuserereje ukuntu asigaye yarigize ngo ikigarasha urumva se namuserereje cyane ukuntu asigaye yarigize ikigarasha so inga nze muvugeho ati mu yandi makuru ubwo Kanziga abateguye genocide anapanga ukuntu azica umugabo we utarayishakaga noneho abonye genocide itangiye arayihunga ntiyareba uko umugambi yateguye uri gushyirwa mu bikorwa abanyabwoba baragwira erega ubwo ubutabera bw'Ubufaransa buba burekeye aho kumukurikirana kandi ubu iyo biba byarabereye i Buruseli ntitwari gukira induru mu bitangazamakuru atariko kuko Abafaransa ari abana beza kuva aho Mozambique yinjiriye mu gakino nta nduru rwose rero gatanazi nagiye kumubwira nti abafobaganyi ngo usigaye warigize ikigarasha urumva se usigaye warigize ikigarasha nuko aravuga ati ngo ibinyoma bya leta y'ubumwe itubwira ati ngo bimaze kuba byinshi ati ngo kuguma kubirebera ngo kandi amateka atwereka ibindi ngo ni amakosa ati ngo ubwo rero ngo sinzaguma gufobagana my people muri kubibona cyangwa muri kubibona oh my goodness muri kubyibonera narindi kubibasomera kumbe nta nubwo nabigejeje kuri screen dore ngaho mujye kubyirebera kuri Facebook hari hashize iminsi nari kuri Facebook none njya kuri Facebook nsanga hariho iyi nkuru irashekeje cyane nuko rero ngo gatanazi ngo ntabwo azaguma gufobagana we my people turifuza rero kuganiriza abantu bo muri uyu muryango kugira ngo bazaze babitwibwirire, batubwire nyine ibyo baciyemo muri iyi myaka, batubwire n'ibyo abafobaganyi babacishijemo, batubwire aho ibi bintu byose bigeze. Urumva se Jean Françoise nziza, ndagupepeye cyane. Dore rero The Rwandan dupromoting newspaper y'abanyarwanda, kuko se ninde wundi wari kubyandika? Ati nitwe twagombye kuba tubyandika. Gatanazi yaravuze ngo abafaransa bicecekeye kubera ko bari muri diri na Kagamisitani yo kohereza abamerisoneri, ingabo za Kagamisitani muri Mozambique guproteja intere z'abafaransa. Abafaransa rero niyo mpamvu bashobora no gutanga ubutabera butuzuye, cyangwa se bakamara imyaka 30 bigirishwa nk'aho batabizi ko umuntu ari umwere, kandi babizi, kandi ari nabo bamucumbikiye iwabo. Urumva se, ari nabo bamuhungishije, ariko kubera ko ari abanyepolitike bagiye muri diri na Kagamisitani isigaye ikorera abafaransa. Ibaze we ukuntu Kagamisitani kera yangaga abafaransa ngo bafashije Kinani, none uyu munsi Kagamisitani nayo ubwayo ikorera abafaransa, noneho kubera ko ibakorera bagahumya, bakigira impumyi, bagahumiriza, aho kugira ngo bazane ubutabera bakazana kubera bakabera Kagamisitani. Kubera iki? Kuko bibereye muri bizinesi nayo. Noneho na media zo mu Bufaransa ubu kandi iyo baba basanze ari coupable, isi yose iba yabimenye, kuko isi yose inkuru ye yarayimenye. Ni ukuvuga ngo the fake news, inkuru ye yose isi yose yarayimenye, ariko the news y'ukuntu finally yagize finally yabaye innocent, iyo yoyo bafunze amaso. Yo, nari nibeshye, nari ngiye muri inbox kandi ndi kuri online, mwari kubona message zanjye inbox, ntazo mubonye rero. Abasheri banjye bose mfite muri inbox, abasheri banjye bose muri inbox, mukomere cyane we, nari nkoze fote. So karero turebe iyi nkuru yo kuri The Rwandan, wanditse ati ngo Ubufaransa bwahagaritse ankete bwakoraga kuri Agatha Habyarimana ngo ko yaba yaragize ngo uruhare ngo muri jenoside. Imagine this. Okay, tujye kuri The Rwandan mubyibonere, iminsi myinshi The Rwandan, mukomere cyane. Nuko dore rero muri kubona ba Rwandan, inkuru yanditswe na Mark Matabaro. Nuko ngaho rero nimubyirebere, nikose umujene wise Kinani cyananiye abagome n'abagambanyi. Uzi ko bishobora kuba ari byo we? None se abagome n'abagambanyi 30 ans plus tard Kinani kiracyabananira Rega rero tubisome mu Gifaransa duhita tubishyira mu Kinyarwanda, nuko kubera ko inkuru hano iri mu Gifaransa. Ati ku itariki ya 16 z'ukwa gatanu ubutabera bw'abafaransa bwahagaritse ankete bwakoraga kuri Agatha Kanziga Habyarimana, umupfakazi wahoze ari perezida w'u Rwanda Juvenal Habyarimana, mu byerekeye niba yari arimo muri jenoside ya 1994. Ati icyemezo cyafashwe n'abajuje bakora muri section crime contre l'humanité ya tribunal y'i Paris, hanyuma bikaba byatewe n'uko nta bimenyetso bihagije babonye nyuma y'uko bamaze imyaka irenga 20 muri procedure bamukurikirana. Ati rero akurikije amakuru yakuye muri AFP ariyo Agence France Presse, ati ngo abacamanza b'amajistra bavuze ko Agathe Kanziga ufite imyaka 82 uyu munsi atari we atari we watangije tragedy y'abanyarwanda ariko Mana ishobora byose ngo ahubwo akaba ari umwe mu ba victime abo victime collaterale y'atanta yo kwicwa k'umugabo we donc ngo ahubwo nawe ari muri victime ngo nyuma y'aho indege ya perezida yarashwe ku itariki ya 6 z'ukwa kane hejuru ngo ya Kigali ngo hanyuma nyuma y'iminsi 3 gusa ku itariki ya 9 nibwo we yahungishijwe akajyanwa mu Bufaransa hamwe n'abana be abyisabiye perezida w'Abafaransa François Mitterrand. Ibaze niwe wisabiye guhungishwa akajyana n'abana be mu Bufaransa. Can you imagine? Umuntu ngo niwe ukoze crime hanyuma kandi akaba ari we wisabira guhungishwa rugikubita. Kandi mubyumve ko niba yarahungishijwe ronefu ibaze iminsi 3 gusa. Ngo kuva mu mwaka w'ibihumbi 2007 ati ngo Agatha Kanziga bari baramukurikiranye ngo baravuze ko ngo afite n'uruhare muri jenoside ngo mbega ni collectif des partis civils pour le Rwanda ngo hanyuma hakaba hari n'amajwi menshi muri diaspora no mu ma ONG yavugaga ko aba bantu bamukurikiranye bakoreraga Kagamisitani kugira ngo bakoreshe jenoside mu nyungu za politiki. Nuko rero ngo bakurikije ibyo abangaba abakritik bavuga bati u Rwanda Kagamisitani rwagerageje gukora ku buryo bwatesha icyubahiro bwatesha agaciro abantu batabushyigikiye abantu batifatanyije na Kagamisitani baba mu buhungiro. Hanyuma rero bashaka gutekinika no gukoresha ubucamanza n'ubutabera bw'Abafaransa kugira ngo bakore politike mbega bakurikirane abatabashyigikiye. Ngo rero abacamanza abajuje bajugunye muri puberi bajugunye hanze ibyo ngibyo byashinjaga umugore wa Habyarimana bivuga ko nta na hamwe bigaragara ko yaba anafite ngo disikuru z'urwango. Oh my goodness, donc bamureze ngo na disikuru ngo ko nta na hamwe hagaragara ko yigeze anafata n'ijambo na rimwe mu ruhame ngo agire icyo avuga. Noneho bikaba binagaragara ko nta naho yari ahuriye na propagande ya radiyo televiziyo Libre de Mille Collinaire yo RTRM. Ariko RTRM uko abanyamakuru bayo bavugaga ibyo bavugaga bibazwa gute abandi bantu batayivugiyeho? Ibyavugwaga kuri Muhabura bigomba kubazwa Kagamisitani. Abanyamakuru baba bigenga bakivugira ibyabo. Kuki abanyamakuru ba RTRM bibazwa Habyarimana bikabazwa kwa Kabuga? Nk'ubu ngubu abasponsori ba show yanjye mujya mubibona YouTube icishamo amapublicity, abo ni abasponsori banjye. Urumva se ndamutse mvuze ibintu badashaka badakunda mwajya kubibaza abasponsori banjye? Urumva se igihe rero baba barimo bajya kubaza za RTRM kwa Habyarimana no kwa Kabuga, umuntu aravuga ati ariko se ko aba ari abasponsori abafinansiye bashinzwe disikuru z'abajournaliste? Ariko itekinika ryo muri Kagamisitani zigashaka guhuza ibintu byose no kuvangavanga abantu byose no guhimbira crime abantu batari abakrimineri, kandi Kagamisitani ihindukira igafata abajenosideri nyabo ikicarana nabo bagakorana iyo bayobotse Kagamisitani. Mbega ni ukuvuga ngo icyaha mu Rwanda rwa Kagamisitani ni ukuba umuntu utekereza, ni ukuba umuntu ukritika, ni ukuba umwopoza. Icyo ni icyaha, uhita uba umujenosideri. Noneho waba uri umujenosideri wayoboka ukaba umwere. Urumva ukuntu Kagamisitani yazanye ibintu bibi cyane mu Rwanda. Noneho rero hejuru yo kubikora ibyo bishitani ku banyarwanda bagashaka no kubikora mu mahanga. ubu rero barabigerageje mu Bufaransa none byabapfubamye byabapfanye niko kubona iyi resultat turi kubona nuko ati rero ati nta kintu na kimwe cyerekana ko yaparticipaga activement muri RTRM ati nta n'ikintu na kimwe cyerekana ko yayifashije ati iyo radiyo yamenyekanye kubera ko yoherezaga ngo amamesaje genosideri ibaze ati ngo ubuhamya bafashe urumva se buvuga ko ari ubuhamya butuzuye burimo itekinika burimo kubeshya burimo kwivuguruza mbega ngo harimo ibintu byinshi cyane bidasobanutse ati ngo ibihuha nubwo ibihuha bishobora kumara igihe ati ntago ibihuha bisimbura ibimenyetso urumva se ati rero habayeho ibihuha atari ko se ibimenyetso biri hehe bati rero twebwe ntago tugendera ku bihuha ati kandi ibimenyetso birabuze urumva se ati ibyo ni bimwe mu byo abajije bavuze ati rero ati hari harabayeho indi audition yabaye muri Decembre 2024 s'il vous plaît ni ukuvuga ngo muri Decembre 2024 nyuma yo kumenya n'ibyo bamenye byose corona bari bakimukurikirana bati ni hahandi nubwo bongeye bakamukurikirana nanone muri Decembre 2024 ni hahandi nta kintu gishyashya na kimwe bazanye ni nk'aho bakomeje bakazana ibyo bihuha ati kandi ibihuha ntabwo ari ibimenyetso nuko rero ati kubera izo mpamvu rero abamajisitara abacamanza bahita bafata umwanzuro ko nta bimenyetso bihagije bihari nta n'impamvu ziciye mu mategeko byo gukomeza kumukurikirana ariyo bita information judiciaire nuko bati umuhungu wa ancienne première dame Léon Habyarimana yavuze kuri platform X ko igihe cyageze kugira ngo ukuri ku mpamvu nyazo z'abazanye kawo yaje muri Grand Lac zagaragara hanyuma bakarekeraho kubeshyera abavictimu ko ari bo bazanye iyo kawo urumva se ati ngo yongeraho ati ibinyoma ni byinshi hanyuma no guceceka kwinshi bati rero bigomba kurangira nuko ati ngo ku byerekeye defense avoka wa madamu Kanziga ariwe bita Maître Philippe Merhac ati ngo yishimiye icyo cyemezo ibaze ngo yasariwe iyo decision ubwo turamutse tutraduje muri cya kinyarwanda nyine cyangwa se kwa kundi nyine aba interprete kera babyicaga yavuga ngo ubwo yapepeye icyo cyemezo yagisezereye nako yagishimye nyine yagipepeye nyine yagishimye icyo cyemezo avuga ko n'ubundi byari byarakozwe yari yarakurikiranywe kubera politike ntabwo ari ukubera ubutabera ati rero arangije anatamaza anashyira hanze adenonsa uko kuntu bamukurikiranyeho badahwema imyaka 20 acharnement de près de 20 ans baramukurikiranye bamugendaho bamurongera bamugendaho badahema umukiriyante we donc ari we former first lady wa Habyarimana wahungiye mu Bufaransa kuva icyo gihe cyose ubwo yahungiye mu Bufaransa kuva muri yageze mu Bufaransa muri 1994 ariko akaba nta statut legale ngo agira mu Bufaransa kubera icyo gihe cyose ngo Ubufaransa bwaramwimye asile politique mu Rwanda, ngo nuko ngo ariko ngo bakavuga bati ntago twamusubiza mu Rwanda, ngo kubera ko bavuze bati najya mu Rwanda ntago azigera abona ubutabera nyabutabera, nta bucamanza nyabwo bwamugeraho. Nuko rero ati ku bamushinjaga hari Maître Patrick Baudouin, avoka wa Fédération Internationale ya Droit Humain, ya yindi FIDH, ari nayo yari iri muri tekinika ryo gukurikirana Onana, umu intellectuel ibaze. Nuko ati we rero icyo cyemezo ntiyacyemeye, ati rero ati we nyine ati ngo arabona ngo abajije ngo bihuse cyane, ngo ni premature we, ngo mbega ngo batanze icyemezo ngo bitagereye igihe. Ibaze imyaka 30 irashize, imyaka 20 irashize akurikiranwa, ariko ngo barihuse we. Ubu se arashaka ko batwara imyaka ingahe? 50 se? 60? 100 se? Nuko rero ngo ubwo ngo bafite kugeza muri ute, ngo kugeza nyine bajuriye nyine bakoze aperi nyine, ngo bafite ubwo nyine nta wamenya niba bazakora aperi cyangwa niba bazabyihorera. Iyi non-lieu rero, non-lieu sinzi ibyari byo mu Kinyarwanda, ngo nibayikonfirima mu byumweru bikeya nyine, ubwo murumva ntibirarangira, kuko ubwo abandi bazadesida niba bajurira babikurikirana cyangwa batabikurikirana. Ati cyakoze nibaramuka batsinzwe, ubwo nibongera nyine nibajurira bakavuga ngo barashaka gukomeza kubikurikirana, nibakomeza gutsindwa, bizaba nyine byerekana gutsindwa, imitsindgo yo muri Kagamisitani, kubera ko nyine muri iyo climat politico judiciaire complexe, climat politique aho bavangavanze politike n'ubutabera, hanyuma na jenoside y'Abanyarwanda ikagirwa igikoresho hagati y'ubu bubanyi n'amahanga, hagati ya Kigali hamwe n'Abanyaburayi bamwe na bamwe barimo Abafaransa. Nuko the Rwandan Mark Matabaro ararangiza muri paragraphe ibanziriza ya nyuma avuga ati Prote Zigiranyirazo yari prefe akaba na musaza wa Agatha Kanziga, nawe yari yararezwe ko ngo yarari mu bateguye jenoside, ngo kuko yarari muri akazu, ngo we akaba nawe yari yaragizwe umwere na Tribunal Penal International pour le Rwanda muri 2009. Ibaze ibi nabyo nta wabimenye we. Donc musaza wa Agatha Kanziga Zigiranyirazo wari warajyanywe muri tribunal Arusha yaramuretse, donc yavuze ko ari umwere muri 2009. Wow. Ati rero iyi gutsindwa bishyashya n'aba Bafaransa kurekeraho gukurikirana iyi dosiye y'umugore wa Habyarimana, biratuma umuntu yibaza ku ruhare rw'ubutabera international, ubutabera mpuzamahanga mu madosiye y'Abanyarwanda, aho ubutabera bwahindutse igikoresho, aho na jenoside nayo yagizwe igikoresho, ikagirwa n'igikoresho cyo gukurikirana aba opoza ba politike bitwaje ngo ubutabera no kwibuka, kandi bibereye muri politike, ahubwo kubera bakoresha ubutabera kugira ngo bakurikirane opposition. Nuko rero my people, murabyibonera, murabyiyumviye, ni gutyo byagenze. Hanyuma kabisa nyine nk'uko nabibabwiye, turifuza nyine ko abantu bo muri uyu muryango baza bakatuganiriza, bakatubwira uko byifashe n'uko babibayemo n'aho bigeze, nuko nyine bazakomeza kubyitwaramo. Reka rero njye muri comments my people, ndebe comment zanyu, ndebe icyo mwabivuzeho, you know. Nuko ubuzima bukomeze, dukomeze tuganire, hanyuma kandi abashaka kuza muri ntuza, muri kugira icyo muvuga, nashyizeho link mukande. So tumaze amasaha 2, dusigaje iminota 15, let's say, yeah, alright, dusigaje 15 minutes. Alright, nuko Rene Shyorongi ndakubona. Rene Shyorongi yari yakomanze avuga ati izi z'iwacu vewe ziva muri South Africa, ntureba se ati iwacu turateranya gusa. Kagamisitani ifata VW igateranya u Rwanda ikavuga ngo made in Rwanda, byahehese. Yarangiza igafata imbunda z'abayisiraheli igateranya u Rwanda ngo made in Rwanda, byahese. Yarangiza kandi ikajya kwifotoza no kwirata no kwitakuma no kwibona ngo dore ngo imbunda zacu, ngo dore ngo Volkswagen zacu we. Neza ara Bakame wajyaga ajya ahantu ngo na hariya hose ni ahacu, ngo urabona ngo n'uriya musozi na hariya hose ni iyacu. Na Kagamisitani rero nawe ajya imbere y'abantu, izi mbunda ni izacu, nitwe twazikoze, Volkswagen nazo ni izacu, made in Rwanda my people. Mahoro nyoni nyinshi, hobe cyane. Nuko ati mbwira Madame Louise, hobe mbwira Gatanazi ko yari mu busajya, ashinje ate Madame Agatha Habyarimana. Urabona neza ko nta muvantara uhinduka, iki kimenyetso gihamya ubuvantara. Gatanazi ngo hari byinshi twabeshywe, ngo ubu igihe cyo kuva mu kubeshywa cyageze we, ngo turekere aho gukomeza ngo ubu agiye kuva mu bafobaganyi we. Ngo arambiwe kuba umufobaganyi, agiye kurekera aho gufobagana. Kivugiye ahubwo reka ndebe comment hano, ndabona hari umuntu wasubije. Ops, Gatanazi yasubije, yavuze ngo ntabwo azaguma gufobagana. Ndamubwira ni mieux vaut tard que jamais. Ndebera Gatanazi noneho, ndebera ati ngo nabanje kuba umunyamakuru usanzwe kuri Real Talk, ariko menya kuba umunyamakuru gusa bidahagije muri kesi y'u Rwanda. Leta ibaho ikabeshya day in day out. Ngaho ni buyumvire Gatanazi koko, ubu muri 2025 muri kubibona se. Reka mbibashyiremo once again, nibagiwe kubibashyiriramo. Dore ni kuri iyo post y'umugore wa Habyarimana, dore ngizo comments. Gatanazi sha, iyo ngusubiriza hano muri comments kuri Facebook mba nkubwiye ni uribuka inyita Yuda, Gatanazi, uribuka inyita Yuda, kubera ko nari ndimo no organiza boycott, nkavuga boycott the Kagamistan in Rwanda, boycott the killing machine, no visit Rwanda, no made in Rwanda, no Rwanda air. Hanyuma ngo kuko ndi organiza boycott, Gatanazi iti ngo ni twebwe bayuda. Nkamubwira ariko ni twebwe bayuda, ntago mubona Kagamistan ikora crime, yica abantu. Hanyuma twebwe kuko turi aba activist dushaka kwikupirwa umuriro n'amazi, ni twebwe bayuda. Gatanazi, oya nzabanza nguca inzoga nyinshi cyane, niyo wavuga ngo urekeye aho gufobagana, cyangwa ngo leta ngo irabeshya day in day out, ngo ntago ukishaka kuba umunyamakuru gusa. ntago nzabyibagirwa ko wanyise yuda kuko ndi muri boycott ndi muri resistance rero ubwo nawe uzaze tubiganire kureka gufobagana gusa ntago bihagije mahoro nyoni nyinshi atanazi ngo yarekeyeho gufobagana we ngo Kagamisitani irabeshya day in day out ngo kuba umunyamakuru ntago bikimuhagije hanyuma se twebwe twari dukora ibyo ngibyo mudutuka imyaka yose bamaze badutuka kugeza n'aho batwita ba yuda ndabyibuka icyo gihe yari arimo ashyigikira abuzukuru bo kwa Mbonyumutwa bagiye muri bizinesi na Kagamisitani ngaterura nkababoyikota nkavuga tubaboyikote cyangwa tubaboyikote nabo turababoyikota kubera ko mwagiye gufatanya n'abajenosideri gatanaza akabashyigikira akavuga ngo ngende umuyuda donc ndimo ndabitrayinga sinzi ni uwuhe yezu na bitrayinze ni Kagamisitani bitaga yezu ngewe nk'abayuda nk'ababitrayinga ngo kuko ndi koorganiza boycott ngo mu Rwanda ngo ni abaturage bazasafaringa abantu bashoje intambara ku Rwanda batera u Rwanda bica abaturage uyu munsi ngo ngewe koorganiza boycott mu mahoro ngo ndimo ndatuma abaturage basafaringa ngo ni ngewe yuda nta muntu nishe nta ntambara nashoje intambara yanjye ni spirituel ni intellectuel ndimo ndabatsinda kandi nkoresheje pouvoir spirituel et intellectuel bakaba ari ngewe banga akaba ari ngewe bita yuda uyu munsi ngo barekeyeho gufobagana ngo Kagamisitani irababeshya cyane what Lamu you and I talk show member komera cyane Ramati ati komera cyane my sister wacu ati ahubwo njyewe ntangazwa n'abantu biyita abapanafricaniste nka Arikana Chiyombori arwanya abafaransa ariko agasingiza Kagamisitani kandi azi neza ko abakorera birababaje pe tubyita yenda ko atari informed ko mbega nta information zihagije afite urumva se biba bitandukanye iyo hari abantu badafite information zihagije hari n'abandi bigira abafobaganyi babizi neza ko bari gufobagana babizi hakaba n'abandi yenda baguye muri propaganda urumva tujye dushishoza tumenye uyu muntu ni umufobaganyi yigize umufobaganyi azi ukuri ariko aracecetse cyangwa agasapotinga Kagamisitani kandi azi ukuri cyangwa se ni umuntu waguye muri propaganda urumva se tukareba tutese uyu muntu afite umutima mwiza ibitekerezo byiza yatwifuriza neza ariko yenda yarashutswe yarabeshywe hakabaho n'abandi noneho bashobora yenda kuba bavuga ngo bagiye kurekeraho gufobagana cyangwa se batangiye kubona ko Kagamisitani ari umukrimineri ko atubeshya kubera iki kuko barimo babona ingoma zihindura imirishyo abanyarwanda bayobewe iki zihindura imirishyo babyinira ingoma ikurikiyeho muri rwa rwego ngo rwabagarira yose ni mubizi se abanyarwanda ukuntu bakora bahora muri ngo zabagarira yose ngo kuko utazamenya ariko my people ngewe iyi myaka yose mwamenye nta na rimwe mwigeze mumbona ngo muri zabagarira yose ngo muri gushaka gushimisha abantu bose no nahagaze muri principe yanjye magarara mu kuri namagara Kagamisitani ku mugaragaro kuri buri issue aho nari mpagaze mwarahamenye nta na rimwe mwigeze mwibaza ngo se Louise ari hehe no aho nari mpagaze kuri buri issue mwarahamenye nta gufobagana na rimwe guhagarara kuri art iyi myaka yose abandi badutuka batwita ba yuda bagira gute bafobagana none barimo barabona zihindura imirishyo bati gufobagana biraturambiye Kagamisitani irabeshya kamemu ntago twakomeza kuba abanyamakuru gusa what abandi banyamakuru barafunze Mahoro Nyoni nyinshi ati Madamu Louise bivuga ko Museveni yaguze ibisasu birasa indege 50 muri Rusiya bigeze Mombasa bivuga ko umusirikare wa Museveni witwa Ikondere ari we wabivanye Mombasa. Ibyo byose bakaba babizi ariko bakabirengaho bagatesha umugore wa Habyarimana umutwe we. Mahoro Nyoni nyinshi arakomeje ati bivuga ko Ikondere ari murumuna n'umusirikare wa Museveni wishwe na maraya ari we General James Kazini. What? Ikondere Museveni yamwiciye Ruwenzori kugira ngo atazamenya amabanga ya Museveni yarazi. Damn, ariko mana yanjye Mahoro prisoners uranyica kabisa, uranyica. Mahoro arakomeje ati Madame Louise, Madame Agatha ashobora kuregera indishyi akarega Ubufaransa ko bwamutesheje umutwe. Ndumva na Padiri Munyeshyaka yarabareze, bazavugane n'abavoka babo babikurikirane. Excellent idea, très bonne idée. Yemwe my people bo muri uyu muryango mubikurikirane. Igihe abantu bakubeshyeye imyaka 30 igashira, mushobora gukora counter suit n'indishyi z'akababaro na diffamation n'ukuntu babahimbiye n'ukuntu bababeshye, noneho namwe mukabakurikirana aho mubona ko ingoma ziri guhindura imirishyo kandi ko bucya bwitwa ejo aho bigeze kubu namwe mwabakurikirana. Ariko Habyarimana, ariko Kabuga, eske ntago mushobora gukora counter lawsuit? Ubundi munaduhe n'uburenganzira dukore documentaire we. Ese mwaretse tugakora project ya documentaire yo ko paraporo ya documentaire yaciye kuri Netflix. Dukore documentaire we, tuzayigurishe kuri za Netflix na heha. Namwe muvuge yo on side of the story. Kubera ko iyi myaka yose babavuga, igihe kirageze ko namwe mwakwivugira noneho ibyanyu, noneho namwe mugakora documentaire zanyu zo kubyerekana. Yo, as a producer, icyo kiraka cyo kubakoraho documentaire ndagishaka we, mukime kabisa dukore documentaire. Hanyuma kandi mukore na counter lawsuit, mubakurikirane. Hanyuma nk'uko twabwiye Nyiramongi ngo niyo byatwara imyaka 30, yo Nyiramongi na Kagame Star mubakurikirane. Akebo kagiwa mugarura, nibo babitangiye. Kubera iki rero abantu batakwidefanda? Nimwidefande namwe mubakurikirane kabisa. Icyo ni igitekerezo. Mahoro Nyoni nyinshi arakomeje ati Madame Louise, kubera inyungu za politike ruriya rubanza bararuryamishije baraceceka, kimwe nk'uko baryamishije urubanza rwa Padiri Munyeshyaka nyuma y'imyaka 25 bikarangiza batsinze. What? Mahoro Nyoni nyinshi ati Madame Louise, abo baturage bazabihomberamo gatanazi avuga ni bande? Keretse niba avuga basajya bene wabo bisobanuka abaturage basanzwe mu Rwanda ntacyo bapfana. Ngo donc ngo mu gihe turi organiza boycott, urabona ukuntu ari at the forefront, nkajya no muri bombardement intellectuel mu bakongore. Boycott negotiation, boycott visit Rwanda, boycott Rwanda Air. Murabona umusaruro waje muri Rwanda Air, bakaboycota Rwanda Air bakayibuza kujya muri ntuza muri espace aérien ya Congo. Yo, tumaze igihe turi muri kampanye boycott everything the Kagame Star. Sinzabyibagirwa kuko biri on the record kuri ntuza kuri Facebook, mwarabibonye mbere yuko Facebook imbroke. Gatanazi Yuda nkavuga FPR yateye yica abantu iteza amasasu. Uyu munsi turorganiza boycott mu mahoro, nta muntu twishe, kandi turaboycota kubera iki? Kubera ko business zo mu Rwanda ni hahandi ni Kagame Star uri propriétaire. Ni ukuvuga ngo tuboycose, who is hurting ni Kagame Star first and foremost. Akaba ariyo mpamvu twazanye niyo gahunda ya boycott revolution bucece. Mwange kohereza amafaranga mu Rwanda, twange kugira Rwanda, twange gukorera Kagame Star, twange kugenda muri Rwanda Air. Ibivuye Rwanda byose boycott. Ari nayo mpamvu justement nari natangiye mvuga ni abuzukuru nabo tuzaba boycota cyangwa ntituzaba boycota kuko ari inshuti zacu. Nuko umwanzuro uravuga ngo tuzaba boycota. Kubera iki? kuko bagiye kwifatanya na Kagamistan. Nari mbahaye chance yo kubabaza ni tuba boycott cyangwa ni tuba boycott, kugira ngo chance bavuge bati nago turi kumwe n'uriya mushiki wacu wagiye gufatanya na Kagamistan, aho kuvuga bati nago turi kumwe na mushiki wacu wagiye gufatanya n'abakrimineri bo muri Kagamistan. Baraza gusobanura ngo ngo yagiye gutanga akazi, ngo watanga akazi. Yo Agasaro ati atanga akazi, hanyuma se Nyiramongi na Kagame bo nibatanga akazi, boycott. Rero Gatanazi iti wowe uri Yuda, njyewe ndi Yuda donc natrayije Yezu buhe. Yezu ni Singapore wabo niwe Kagame niwe Yezu natrayije. Ninde d'abord ninde Yezu natrayije? Niba ashaka kumbwira Yezu natrayije. Ensuite boycott irafecta Kagamistan, ni njyewe Yuda. Uyu munsi ngo nago bagifobagana, ngo byabarambiye gufobagana, ngo Kagamistan arabeshya cyane, ngo birabarambiye kuba abanyamakuru gusa. Gatanazi, bravo, bravo, bravo. Courage kandi courage. Mieux vaut tard que jamais. Abibohora ni mwibohora. Anyways, my people, kuyavuga siko kuyamara. Resha ingoma zigiye guhindura imirishyo. Abari barigize abakorabo ba killing machine ubu bagiye gutangira bavuge ngo no, ngo natwe turi ibigarasha. Ubu kuba ikigarasha bigiye kuba ibintu bifite vare. Bagiye gutangira nabo baba activist. Kare. Mahoro ni nyinshi atagata. Hari ikindi kintu agomba kurega Abafaransa baguye mu ndege babaha amafaranga ya assurance y'indege. Wow. Hanyuma Abanyarwanda bo nothing. Kandi indege yari y'Abafaransa koko we. Nuko Mahoro ni nyinshi ati Madame Louise naho Habyarimana na Ntaryamira aho kubaha amafaranga yabo bahoreza i Kigali muri Sonarwa mu Nyenzi bazi neza Madame Agata ko ari mu Bufaransa, ni kosa rikomeye. Damn. Nuko nyine inkotanyi zirayarya. Wow, zirangije na wa mutipe wari ufite Sonarwa nawe ni harya nibamuriye. Anyways, Mahoro ni nyinshi ati zigume hamwe, wahigaga abandi nawe azahinduka umuhigo. Ndababwiye ngo ingoma zahinduye imirishyo. Iyo mubona bigeze ahangaha, mwibuke ko ejo bundi hari habaye urubanza rwa Onana, bariya bakagamize bo mu Bufaransa bari gukurikirana Onana, byarabapfubanye. Murabizi ko urubanza rwa Onana rwarangiye. None n'urubanza rwo kwa Habyarimana dore uko bigenze, tutibagiwe nuko urubanza rwo kwa Kabuga uko byagenze. Ni ukuvuga ngo rero akebo kagiwa mugarura, igihe kirageze ko n'ababeshyewe nabo barega. Urumva se? Ese wamugani, niba mwarabeshyewe, niba mwaraharabitswe iyi myaka yose bakabakurikirana kandi bababeshyera, igihe kirageze ko namwe murege, namwe mubarege nabo bakurikirana. Et puis voilà, c'est tout. Hanyuma kandi nk'uko nabwiye Nyiramongi self protection, ibyo avuga ngo umugore ngo yishe umugabo kugira ngo agume ku ngoma, ibyo ni Nyiramongi wabikora. Anko Kaga wa Kagamistan, nabwiye Anko Kaga wa Kagamistan icunga sana, ibyo ni Nyiramongi wabikora. Hanyuma kandi ndangize mwibutsa nyine nk'uko nari nabipostinze, niyo byatwara imyaka 30, ibibi byose mukorera Abanyarwanda muhumure namwe bizabageraho kabisa, namwe muzakurikiranwa, ntaho muzahungira ubutabera. Murakoze rero cyane my people, Imana ikomeze ibamenye muri byo, muri byose my people. Weekend nziza my people, weekend nziza. Bizu mahoro nyoni nyinshi, thank you so much. N'abahabaye mwese ari mahoro nyoni nyinshi, n'abandi bose Lamu, thank you. Rene Shorongi, mwakoze cyane. Mok Parunzora Kata, oh, je n'avais pas vu votre commentaire. Oh là là, Mok Parunzora Kata, on est ensemble la famille, la matrie ou la vie éternelle. Nous sommes la victoire. Orogeni. Merci la famille. Symphorien Pombe, la lumière. Non kagamisé, zéro kagamisation ici. Nous sommes dans la résistance face au Kagamistan. Symphorien Pombe, Atiporo Kagame malade. Eh oui, vraiment, quand le Rwanda va se libérer de ça, on va faire la fête, la famille, on va faire la fête. Urukiko rwararangiye bana, rwararangiye. None se onana ahubwo urabinyibukije, nzongera mutumira azatubwira uko byarangiye n'aho bigeze, ariko murabibona neza ko batatsinze, ntago batsinze. Sesi komera cyane, weekend nziza cyane. Nuko urwahonana rwararangiye, nuko batavuze umwanzuro nyawe, bamuhaye ibihano bya fake cyane, nyine byerekana nyine ko bari bamuhimbiye. We ibihano bahaye onana nyine ni ibikwereka ko bari mbega ni nothing. Niko bizu my people, turi kumwe rero. Mugire weekend nziza my people. Kuyavuga siko kuyamara. Nejo bundi tuzagaruka, tuzaba turi kumwe. turi kumwe. Igitabo cyanjye harabura iminsi mikeya, we kigeze kure, cyararangiye we. Harabura iminsi mikeya ngo Amazon inyohereze kopi yanjye, ahasigaye nkahita nyibereka. Mukomere rero my people, weekend nziza. Bizu mwah. Turi kumwe. Yo, nibagiye kubacurangira indirimbo yanjye we. Awasi nzayibacurangira ubutaha, nahejo muri diffusion rero. Mahoro nyene nyinshi, bizu bizu turi kumwe nahejo.